Chapter 3295. She took out a letter from her bag and bit her lower lip as she gripped it tightly. At night, after the interview, Xianxia was about to remove her makeup when her assistant suddenly walked over and handed her a letter. Xianxia took it and lowered her head to look at it. It was an exquisitely made invitation. She could not help feeling curious and raised her head to ask, "What is this?" The assistant's expression was a little unnatural as she stammered, This is an invitation to the charity banquet." "What charity banquet?" Xianxia was confused. Her assistant explained, "Don't you know? This is an internationally renowned charity banquet. Many legendary figures will be attending." "Oh? Yes. I heard that many investors and producers will be there." Sure, you must go. Who knows, you might be able to get a good film contract." As she said this, there was a complicated look in the assistant's eyes. Xianxia took it and saw that the date was the day after tomorrow. She did not seem to have any work to do the night after tomorrow. The venue for the charity banquet was a private cruise ship. Xianxia said, "Actually, I'm not interested in film contracts. Help me reject them." "Are you really not going?" The assistant suddenly thought of something and deliberately said, "You can use your things to bid for the charity banquet. The money from the auction will be used for charity. Who knows, it might be able to help little Yueyao." Xianxia's heart could not help but move when she said this. Doing more good deeds is to accumulate blessings for oneself and also for one's loved ones. Xianxia could not help but smile when she heard this. "Is it the day after tomorrow?" "Yes. Tomorrow is the National Drama Festival. If it's the day after tomorrow, I can use my jewelry to participate in the auction." "Are you going?" "Hearing you say this, I think it makes sense. I also hope to accumulate some blessings for Yueyao." She was stunned for a moment before she gritted her teeth and forced a smile. "Amichum." However, when she turned around to face the corner of the wall, she furrowed her brows. She seemed to be a little worried, or perhaps, she was filled with immense guilt. After Xianxia left, Mu Shi, who was hiding in a corner, hurriedly took out her phone and looked around vigilantly before dialing a number. It took a long time for the call to get through. She said anxiously, "Hello? Hello? Hello? I have already given her the invitation letter. Can you let my parents go now?" The man's voice, which had been altered, came from the other end. "How would I know if you gave it to me or not? What if you don't give it to me and are trying to trick me? Do you think I'll believe you so easily? I'm really giving it to you." Mu Shi's face flushed red as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Why would I lie to you? My parents are in your hands, how would I dare to lie to you? I did everything according to your instructions. What else do you want me to do? Do you still remember what I asked of you? Only when Xianxia is here will our deal be valid." The man paused for a moment before continuing. "The day after tomorrow, until Xianxia shows up at the banquet, I'll let your parents go." She was furious. You didn't keep your word." Chapter 3296. "Since you've kept your promise, I'll keep mine, too. Don't worry, your parents are safe and sound." She was stunned for a long time before she finally took a step back. "All right. If that's the case, then let me hear my parents' voices. I want to make sure that they're safe and sound." The man on the other end sneered. "Impossible. Don't make such unreasonable demands." "How is this an unreasonable request?" "As a condition, I must at least confirm my parents' safety before I continue to fulfill our agreement." Mu Shi's refusal to admit that there was a deal between them was probably due to her guilt. The man was clearly unwilling to back down as he coldly said, "Dream on. You didn't do anything to them, did you?" She asked suspiciously. "No. How can that be? There are bargaining chips, I can't possibly do anything to them." "I don't believe you. It's your business if you don't believe me. Then, let me hear their voices, she persisted. Suddenly, she threatened, if not, I'll take back that invitation. There was a sudden heart-palpitating silence on the other end. It seemed that her threat had finally taken effect. Then, following a series of soft sounds, a man's trembling voice could be heard. Mu Shi. Mu Shi, Dad. When she heard the familiar and weathered voice, the worry and uneasiness she had been feeling these past few days caused her legs to give way. She knelt on the ground with tears rolling down her cheeks. Dad. Are you okay? Is Mom okay? The man's voice on the other end was tired and restrained. His voice was hoarse and trembling. She did not know what kind of shock and torture he and her mother had been through these past few days. I'm fine, you don't have to worry. How could she believe him when he told her not to worry? She asked worriedly, did they hit you or mistreat you? No. They didn't mistreat me, the man's voice trembled as he said this. She felt even more worried when she heard this. She knew that her father did not dare to tell the truth in front of those people, so he was avoiding the main point and dwelling on the trivial. She carefully asked, did they give you food? There was another period of silence on the other end. Then, there was a series of soft sounds, followed by a man's voice, did you hear that? They are all fine. You can rest assured now. Mu Shi gritted her teeth and was about to speak when the man said coldly, if Yunshursher doesn't appear, you can forget about seeing them again. You know that too, right? It doesn't matter if you call the police or ask for help. If you dare, you can try. Is the police faster, or, my bullets faster? If you dare to leak a single word, don't blame me for being merciless. With that, the man hung up the phone. Mu Shi covered her mouth in fear and bit her fingers as she sank into an endless state of panic. In the evening, Yunshursher was in front of the wardrobe looking for jewelry. Yu leaned against the door and mumbled, Mommy, what are you looking for? Yes. There's a charity banquet the day after tomorrow. Prepare to attend it. Charity banquet? Why hadn't he heard of it? The charity banquet, as the name suggested, was a banquet with the theme of charity. Chapter 3297. The main purpose was to hold some auctions through this banquet. After deducting expenses, the proceeds from the auctions would all be used for charity. The proceeds from the auctions would usually be explained before the auction to explain what the proceeds would be used for. The proceeds could also be allocated and used through a foundation with credibility. If there was a charity banquet, Daddy should have received an invitation. However, he did not hear anything from him. Mommy, what are you going to auction? The first piece of jewelry to wear at the award ceremony, Yunshursher said. Oh, Mommy is going all out. Yu narrowed his eyes and teased. Of course. Yunshursher opened a row of drawers in the cloakroom. There was a dazzling array of jewelry inside. She picked up a ruby necklace and smiled. Wear this necklace for the National Drama Award ceremony. Then, when the charity banquet is held, we can auction this necklace. It will definitely fetch a good price. Mommy is so cunning. This necklace is worth more than 1,000,000 yuan. If you wear this necklace to the award ceremony tomorrow, once you win the award, this necklace will also rise in value. Yunshursher pinched his cheeks gently. My Yu, how are you so smart? I want to ask Mommy this question. Yu smiled. How did Mommy give birth to me so smart? Yunshursher was overjoyed when she heard this. Thus, she decided to wear this ruby necklace to the National Drama Award ceremony. The National Drama Award ceremony was held in Shanghai City. The night before the ceremony, Mu Yaja and Yunshursher chartered a flight to Shanghai City. Before the ceremony, there would be a red carpet event. In order for his woman to appear on the stage of the ceremony, Mu Yaja specially hired a top styling team so that she could appear beautiful on the red carpet. However, after going through childbirth, confinement, and a sweet honeymoon, Yunshushu seemed to have put on some weight. She was 165 meters tall. In the past, she only weighed a little more than 100 kilograms. Now, she weighed 110 kilograms. Logically speaking, with such a tall stature, 110 kilograms wasn't a bad number. But for celebrities, managing their figure was one of the most important lessons. For celebrities, even if they gained half a kilogram, the difference was still huge. When she went to try on the evening gowns in the morning, there was a dress that Yunshushu especially liked. In the end, she couldn't zip it up no matter how hard she tried. She took off the dress awkwardly, covered her face shyly, and smiled bitterly. In the past, wearing this dress would have been easy. However, after a honeymoon, a certain man fed her sausages, salads, steaks, and other sumptuous meals. She didn't dare to imagine what the media would say about her the next day if she appeared at the award ceremony. He said that he had gained weight and that his figure was out of shape. Yunshushu's heart ached just thinking about it. However, the good thing was that she had only gained a little more than 5 kilograms. Most of the weight was distributed on her thighs and hips. When she wore the dress, it wasn't that obvious. If the weight was on her face, she would be too ashamed to walk the red carpet. Chapter 3298. Even when she was preparing for pregnancy, her weight had shot up to 140 pounds, but her face was still very thin. What was even more fortunate was that many pregnant women would have stretch marks when they were pregnant. Only the heavens were kind to her and she didn't have stretch marks. After all, she was pregnant with the Yueyao. Her daughter felt sorry for her and didn't make her belly too big. In the end, after confirming the gown, Yunshushu and Mu Yaja returned to the hotel. She collapsed on the bed and covered her face sadly. "I want to lose weight." This was the 28th time she said this tonight. A certain man didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You're already married. Why are you still trying to lose weight?" Yunshushu said in all seriousness, "I want to become beautiful." The man's lips curled into a smile. "Pretty? Who are you trying to make beautiful for?" "For you to see." "If it's for me to see, then it's not necessary. Even if your figure goes out of shape and you have a big belly, I won't mind." When Yunshushu heard this, she covered his thin lips in a panic. "Humph, don't say such things. It's inauspicious. What if it really comes true? Do you think I'm not fat enough?" "Inauspicious?" Mu Yaja was amused by her words. What kind of words was that? He grabbed her wrist and moved her little hand away from his mouth. Raising his handsome eyebrows, he said, "How is this inauspicious? It's not like I jinxed it. Whatever I say comes true. But what if I really get fat? It's just a honeymoon. How did I gain 5 pounds? How did I gain so much weight? It's okay." Mu Yaja kissed her fingertips. "I don't mind." "You don't mind, but I do." Yunshushu pulled her hand away, turned around, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window unhappily. She muttered to herself, "It's easy for a certain someone to say that. If that day really comes and I really get that fat, who knows if a certain someone will dislike me?" The floor-to-ceiling windows faced the sea. At night, under the reflection of the moonlight, the surface of the sea sparkled. The beautiful night scene made people calm down. Behind her, the man's aura closed in. He covered her from behind and pinned her down. His large palm clasped her waist and gently stroked it. "Why do I feel like you haven't gained much weight?" "That's because you treated me like a pig. When the time comes and you don't have enough food to eat at the end of the year, you can sell me for a high price." When Mu Yaja heard this, he couldn't help but be amused by her description. Was he being raised like a pig? Selling by weight? "I, Mu Yaja, am not down to the point of selling pork." "Ha!" Yunshushu wanted to turn around but was pinned down by him. She muttered, "Hey, don't press on me. You're so heavy." The sea view is so beautiful. Haven't you always wanted to see the sea? As he said this, his large palm clasped her waist and lifted up a corner of her skirt. In the end, she was carried to the bed and had sex with him. Naturally, it was a matter of course. On the bed, a certain man instantly turned into a beast and swallowed her whole. However, that night, Wuxia knew how to control himself. After having sex with her once, he stopped and the two of them slept in each other's arms. Chapter 3299. The National Drama Festival was at night. On the red carpet, the stars were shining brightly. The Lincoln limousine was parked at the entrance of the venue. Xianxia sat in the car and looked at the crowd in front of her. The spotlights were flashing continuously. It seemed like she had not seen such a scene in a long time. On the red carpet, the stars were shining brightly. The celebrities who had already arrived walked down the red carpet and were baptized by the spotlights. Finally, they left their signature on the autograph board. Xianxia suddenly grabbed his hand nervously. Her palm was covered in a layer of cold sweat, obviously because she was nervous. He placed his hand on the back of hers and smiled at her. "What's wrong? Are you nervous? There are so many people. After all, I haven't experienced such a scene in a long time. I'm not used to it for a while." Xianxia lamented, "I heard that the number of guests for this year's National Drama Festival is the highest in history. Moreover, there are many capable veteran actors. In the same batch of nominees as me, there's an outstanding veteran actor. I don't know if I'll still have a chance to win with her around. Don't be nervous." He was accompanying her. The moment the car door opened, the media rushed over like a tidal wave and raised their cameras. Before Xianxia could get out of the car, she was blinded by the spotlights that came out of nowhere. It was too bright. For a moment, her world was as bright as day. Wuxia got out of the car first. Then, he turned around and held her hand, helping her out of the car like a gentleman. The two of them were instantly surrounded by the media. Questions came one after another like a cannonball. The staff in charge of maintaining order at the scene immediately rushed over and separated the media from the reporters. Xianxia and Wuxia were finally released. It was too crazy. It had been a long time since they had seen such a scary scene. Xianxia and Wuxia walked down the red carpet and gradually got used to the spotlights. Xianxia was also used to it. She smiled proudly and hooked her arm around Wuxia's arm. The couple, a handsome man and a beautiful woman, exuded their aura. It was not their first time appearing together in front of the media. However, this was the first time they were together after the wedding. Back then, when Wuxia had announced their relationship, many media outlets had been secretly criticizing them. There was no other reason other than the fact that they had hatched a conspiracy theory. They believed that the reason why the two of them got together was because they were using each other. Back then, Wuxia had just left the Mu Group. Even though he had founded the Jianghu Financial Group, his foundation was not very stable. Therefore, he needed a source of hype. In order to get listed, he naturally needed fame. Therefore, he made use of Xianxia to hype up their relationship and bring attention to the company. As for Xianxia, the media speculated that she was unscrupulous in order to marry into a rich family. She had already given birth to 2 sons, but she still did not hold a wedding. Even though Wuxia said that the two of them had already registered their marriage, the marriage certificate had not been posted yet. Who would believe it? Therefore, many people were not optimistic about this relationship. In a place like the entertainment industry, it was always the newcomers who were smiling and the old ones who were crying. It was not that there had never been an on-screen couple, but the more high-profile this love was, the faster it died. Back then, how high-profile were Wuxia and Xianxia? They participated in the reality show and even gathered a large number of fans. The fans named them the good-looking couple, which meant that the couple was very good-looking. Chapter 3300. It meant that both husband and wife were very good-looking and had a pair of adorable sons. Even the pair of adorable babies were very good-looking. They were already so good-looking at such a young age. There was no doubt that when they grew up, they would be even more good-looking. In the end, the public display of affection was so high-profile that it even came to fruition. Many female celebrities who wanted to climb up the social ladder but still failed to do so. They were so jealous that their porcelain teeth were about to shatter. There was a female celebrity who was rather popular recently. The reason why she was popular was not because of her outstanding works, but because she and her rich boyfriend had been in a love marathon for 10 years and had given birth to a son and daughter. Now, her third child was in her stomach, but marrying into a rich family was still far away. Her boyfriend was born in a prestigious family in the capital. In his family, his mother was the head of the family and had the right to speak. No matter how much this female celebrity tried to please her boyfriend's mother and even addressed her as mother-in-law on Weibo, she still did not care about her. It was obvious that she looked down on female celebrities in the entertainment industry, especially those who wanted to curry favor with rich families. Her third child was a son. According to the rules, she should finally have a chance to marry into a rich family, right? In the end, after waiting for 10 years, her boyfriend's negotiation came. The children, including the unborn baby in her stomach, belonged to him. And a check of 200 million yuan was to be compensation. In other words, the Empress Dowager at home had given a strict order to not acknowledge her as a daughter-in-law. On the other hand, Xianxia was successful in both her love life and her career. She also had a pair of adorable sons and recently had a daughter. It could be said that it was a double blessing. Wuxia was famous in the industry for doting on his wife. Previously, when they were doing a reality show, another celebrity couple had participated in it. But it was easy to tell the difference between a fake love and a real love through the details. Even though that celebrity couple was lovey-dovey and throwing sugar in front of the camera, it could not compare to Wuxia's loving gaze in the behind-the-scenes video. He wasn't good with words, and he wasn't like the other couple who always said sweet things. His love for her was reflected in every small detail. Loving her was as natural as if it was carved into his bones. She had also become a part of his life. As soon as the two appeared on the red carpet, they immediately became the center of attention. Xianxia was too popular. Even though she had been recuperating at home for a long time, her popularity did not decrease in the slightest. When they found out that she would be attending the National Drama Award ceremony, many fans traveled thousands of miles to Shanghai City to wait at the venue. They wanted to see their goddess, even if it was just a glimpse. When Xianxia and Wuxia appeared, the fans screamed excitedly. It was enough to shatter their eardrums. "Ah! Xianxia. We love you." The attractive couple. Xianxia's husband was here too. "Oh my God! Boss Mu is so handsome." Crazy screams, like the waves, rose and fell one after another. Xianxia held Wuxia's hand nervously. When she heard someone shouting, "Boss Mu," she almost broke into laughter. "Did you hear that? Someone's calling you." Xianxia teased him on purpose. "I didn't expect your fans to be so crazy." Chapter 3301. Wuxia turned around and looked at the group of fans. With just one look, the crowd seemed to have exploded and screamed again. "Why do I feel that your fans are a lot crazier than mine? Don't tell me that these fans are all here for you." Xianxia was a little unhappy and said in a low voice. Wuxia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hearing her speak, he was full of jealousy. He said, "These are all your fans." "Liar." Xianxia didn't believe him. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she said, "I clearly heard them calling your name." However, Wuxia said, "Because I'm your man, your fans love me and my dog." These words were very pleasing to her ears. Xianxia nodded happily and was very satisfied with his explanation. She held on to him as they walked to the front of the interview table and accepted a few simple interviews from the MC. The two of them walked to the front of the autograph board. Wuxia took the golden marker pen from the MC's hand and unscrewed the cap before passing it to her. It was only when she finished signing her name that he picked up the pen and signed his name. His flamboyant signature stuck closely to her signature and became the most eye-catching scene on the autograph board. There was a burst of excited screams from the fans. To them, this kind of sweet public display of affection was their favorite. When some celebrities showed their affection to each other, they felt that it was pretentious, as if they had received a script in advance. It was even more fake than acting. However, for people who truly loved each other, their eyes couldn't be deceived at all. The deep love in their eyes couldn't be hidden at all. When Unspoken was signing, Wuxia's gaze was fixed on her hand with a gentle smile. He was very focused. When he was signing, Unspoken tilted her head to look at him. Her eyes were filled with the adoration of a little woman and the special love of a wife for her husband. The entire venue was suddenly surrounded by pink love bubbles. The fans were so excited that they were shouting for them. Attractive couple. Attractive couple. Attractive couple. Ah! Unspoken turned around and gracefully waved to her fans. However, as she turned around, she almost tripped on the steps beneath her feet. Wuxia hurriedly stretched out his hand to support her firmly, and only then did she manage to avoid falling. "Madam, be careful." Unspoken's lips twitched awkwardly. She secretly turned around and saw a camera frantically snapping shots in her direction. Wuxia immediately stepped forward to block her. He didn't do it deliberately, blocking her naturally. His large palm wrapped around her waist and pulled her into his embrace. They looked at each other and smiled. Then, he walked into the venue with her in his arms. At that time, the venue was not full yet. Wuxia and Unspoken arrived early, so there weren't many celebrities sitting in the empty seats. The National Drama Festival was broadcasted live. Because it was a live broadcast, they were very particular about which time to appear. It's too early. But if it's too late, it won't do if they don't have a celebrity status. For such a live broadcast, the viewership ratings would gradually increase. If they appeared at the beginning, there wouldn't be an appropriate warm-up, so there wouldn't be many viewers. In this way, the exposure rate would be much lower. Chapter 3302. Some of the smaller celebrities had to spend a lot of money to rent their outfits. To be able to attend such an award ceremony, they had to fight for such resources for a long time. They had to squeeze their brains out to get a spot. If they appeared too early, wouldn't it be a waste of resources? Many celebrities dreamed of appearing last because the viewership ratings would reach a peak before the award ceremony started. However, most of the people who appeared last were those with top-notch resources or powerful backgrounds. Most of them were A-listers. Hence, at a glance, Unspoken realized that the stars present were all veteran actors. These veteran actors, who had been acting for most of their lives, did not care about whether they would appear on stage sooner or later. They also disdained to compete with the younger stars for such ostentatious things. Hence, they arrived early. Out of courtesy, Unspoken went over to greet them one by one. Some of the veteran actors were seniors that she liked, so she respected them from the bottom of her heart. After the greetings, she returned to her seat and realized that the name tag beside her said Yang Mi, and Jun Mo was beside Wuxia. Her row was filled with Huanyu's artists. Not long after, Yang Mi and Li Jiuxian arrived. Li Jiuxian was Yang Mi's male companion. Unspoken noticed that the two of them were still very intimate even when they entered the venue. Li Jiuxian hugged her waist and looked at her with a gentle gaze that didn't seem like an ordinary friend's. Yang Mi was surprised to see Unspoken. She didn't expect to reunite with her at such an occasion. She had heard that there were some unforeseen events, so Unspoken had been in a semi-retired state. She didn't expect her to suddenly appear today and give her a big surprise. "Sure, why are you here? I've been nominated for Best Supporting Actress. The organizers invited me to attend the award ceremony. Yang Mi glanced at the people beside her and recognized Mu Yaja immediately. Her attitude immediately became respectful and careful. Yun Shishir knew that she was in awe of Mu Yaja. She smiled slightly and said, "Have a seat." Okay. Yang Chong and Li Jiuxian sat down cautiously. Obviously, they didn't know that Mu Yaja would come as a guest, so they were a little nervous. Yun Shishir said, "The organizers are so considerate to arrange for you and Jun Mo to be by my side. They know that we are close." When Yang Chong heard this, her nervousness eased a little. She smiled and felt warmth in her heart. She was a little older now, so she was no longer as headstrong as when she first debuted. After many years in the entertainment industry, her personality had also been tempered. She said, "Shishir, I really envy you. Look at you, how happy are you now? Kind people can also become very lucky. The heavens are really looking after you." Yun Shishir glanced at her, then at Li Jiuxian, who was sitting beside her, and suddenly asked, "Are you two dating?" Yang Chong's expression froze, and she immediately became embarrassed. Beside her, Li Jiuxian also became uneasy, but he didn't immediately deny it. Instead, he glanced at Yang Chong, as if he was following her advice. "Shishir. You. How did you know?" She was indeed dating Li Jiuxian. The rumors that spread back then were true. She and Li Jiuxian fell in love with each other because of the movie. It was just that they didn't have a clear relationship, so they kept each other warm. Chapter 3303. After all, being a celebrity was a very lonely profession. Sometimes, they would be filming in a remote mountain forest for months without any contact with the opposite sex. Men and women were both emotional creatures with instincts and desires. It was inevitable that they would be unable to control themselves. However, after that, Yang Mi broke up with Li Jiuxian. She was career-minded and wanted to take advantage of her youth to try her luck. Moreover, Li Jiuxian was 2 years younger than her. Not to mention the outside world and fans, even she did not think highly of it and was hesitant. However, some time ago, Li Jiuxian and Yang Mi had worked together in another movie. Li Jiuxian could not let go of Yang Mi, so he started to pursue her passionately. Reluctantly, Yang Mi secretly dated him for a few months. She kept it a secret from the media, and her confidentiality measures were watertight. Even in the company, no one knew that they were dating. Hence, when Yun Shishir asked about this, Yang Mi was quite surprised. Yun Shishir smiled mysteriously. "I can tell." "You can tell?" "Of course." Li Jiuxian looked at her with a deep love in his eyes that was boiling hot. After walking the red carpet and entering the venue, they did not have to hold hands anymore. However, until they sat down, they held hands tightly. The dress that Yang Mi was wearing this time was especially restrictive. Hence, Li Jiuxian was worried and cautious, afraid that she would bump into something. This kind of thoughtfulness was only found between couples. Yang Mi was surprised by her keen attention to details. Beside her, Li Jiuxian nodded at Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja. Then, he said to Yang Mi, "There are a few directors and producers sitting over there. I'll go greet them and be right there." "Okay." After Li Jiuxian left, Yang Mi's face revealed a sense of emptiness. When Yun Shishir saw this, she was a little surprised and asked, "What's wrong?" "I'm a little hesitant." "What are you hesitating about?" Yang Mi turned around and looked at her. She confessed from the bottom of her heart, "Shishir, do you know why I'm so envious of you? Because you have a love that makes others envious and jealous. I also yearned for it, but I felt a little hopeless when it came to love. I didn't dare to touch it. I was afraid that if I fell too deeply in love, would inevitably get hurt. I started dating Aja because of this concern. I don't know if he's the one I've been waiting for, and I can't be sure if he's the one who'll accompany me for the rest of my life. After a pause, Yang Mi continued, Sure, you know that I'm too sensitive and insecure. She yearned for love, but was afraid of getting hurt. Aja had always wanted to announce our relationship to the media, but I didn't dare to. I was afraid that once our relationship was exposed to the public, those blessings or slanderous rumors would definitely cause our relationship to end without any results. Although I really want to hold his hand and face the camera openly, I'm afraid that if the fans find out, I'll be criticized again. Unspoken said, they are slandering you because you have the happiness and beauty that they will never get. The reason why they're paying so much attention to you is because you're outstanding. That's why you're eye-catching. Yang Jian was stunned. You can only be praised if you can withstand slander. Moreover, if you and he are really destined to be together, why would you be affected by what others say? Chapter 3304. If he's not worried about himself, why are you worried about him? If he sees you as number one, popularity and fans are nothing. I don't want to delay his career. Then are you willing to delay your own life? This sentence seemed to wake her up. I think a happy family is more important than a career. 1 house, 2 people, 3 meals, 4 seasons. This is probably the dream of every woman, right? Yang Mi sat in her seat in a daze, unable to recover for a long time. Suddenly, she smiled at Unspoken. Thank you, Sure. I've thought it through. That's good. Li Jiuxian returned quickly. Yang Chang smiled at him. The affection between the two of them was self-evident. The guests entered one after another, and the venue became busy. The music was elegant, and the lights made the whole hall look magnificent. Unspoken rarely attended such an occasion, so she was inevitably nervous. However, she didn't know why, but as long as this man was by her side, no matter how big the occasion was, she could always maintain her calm. Subconsciously, her dependence on him had unknowingly become deeply ingrained. When all the celebrities arrived, the opening ceremony officially began at 9 p.m. The award ceremony was interspersed with awards and performances. The third round of award ceremony was to award the best actress in a TV series of the year. Unspoken had only taken on a few scripts since her debut. One of them was a movie, and the other was the lead role of Extreme Youth, which had yet to be broadcast. Therefore, such an award naturally had no chance with her. The big screen showed the list of nominees, and Yang Mi's name was on it. It was obvious that Yang Mi was very nervous. Although she had been in the industry for many years and had seen countless big occasions, it was obvious that she was a little hesitant. After all, the actors competing with her were all very strong. The MC walked on stage and exchanged greetings with the guests. Then, he picked up his line card and kept the audience guessing. Finally, when he read Yang Mi's name, the big screen switched to Yang Mi's face, and the venue erupted into thunderous applause. Yang Mi covered her mouth in excitement. She was so surprised that the corners of her eyes were slightly wet. Unspoken sincerely congratulated her. Beside her, Li Jiuxian looked at her with relief and hugged her. Yang Mi, congratulations. The celebrities sitting in front and behind her also congratulated her. Hearing this, Yang Mi clasped her hands together and pressed them against her lips to express her gratitude to those who congratulated her. Amidst the thunderous applause, she carefully lifted her skirt and walked onto the stage. On the big screen, she stood in front of the podium with tears in her eyes and hugged the guest presenter. After receiving the trophy, Yang Mi turned to look at the audience and revealed a beautiful smile. Thank you all for your love. First of all, I'm terrified to be able to stand here today. Therefore, there are many seniors with superb acting skills sitting here. I'm very encouraged to be able to win an award. After she finished her speech, she paused for a moment and smiled deeply. Standing here, I still want to thank someone. Everyone quieted down. Yang Mi looked at Li Jiuxian's seat, and as if she had made up her mind, she said with a resolute gaze, Jiuxian. The audience was in an uproar. There were many fans of Li Jiuxian and Yang Chong present, so it was inevitable that they were surprised to hear Yang Chong mention Li Jiuxian's name. What kind of situation was this? Chapter 3305. Yang Mi looked at Li Jiuxian's seat. She seemed to have made up her mind about something as she said with determination, "Jiuxian." The audience was in an uproar. There were many fans of Li Jiuxian and Yang Mi in the audience. It was inevitable that Yang Mi would mention Li Jiuxian's name. The camera cut to Li Jiuxian's face. He stared at the screen in a daze. Obviously, he found it hard to believe that Yang Mi would mention his name at such a public award ceremony. Yang Mi looked below the stage and her gaze fell on Li Jiuxian. Finally, she looked at the camera and said solemnly, "Today, I have received such an honor on such a sacred stage. I would like to use this meaningful day to announce something." There was a slight uproar in the audience as they discussed. However, in the blink of an eye, it was dead silent. Yang Mi looked at the camera and said word by word, "Jiuxian and I have been dating for a year." As soon as she finished speaking, the audience was in an uproar. On the screen, there were two images. One showed Yang Mi's affectionate face while the other showed Li Jiuxian's shocked and touched face. "I sincerely hope that I can receive everyone's blessings. Of course, even if there are no blessings, Jiuxian and I will continue to be happy." The audience applauded enthusiastically and cheered from the guests. Unspoken saw this and smiled happily. Seeing that Li Jiuxian was still sitting in a daze, she suddenly pushed his shoulder gently. Li Jiuxian turned to look at her in surprise. However, he heard her say, at this time, as her boyfriend, "Shouldn't you go up on stage and give her a warm hug?" Li Jiuxian was suddenly enlightened. He immediately stood up and walked up the stage with the camera following him. All along, he had been quick to announce their relationship. However, Yang Mi had been hesitant. He didn't know what she was worried about. He had wondered if she didn't think highly of their future or if she valued fame and fortune too much. She felt that announcing their relationship would affect her career. After all, although Li Jiuxian's status wasn't as high as hers, he was still a popular idol of the new generation. He did not mention this matter again. After all, he did not want her to think that he was with her for her resources. Li Jiuxian's manager also knew about their relationship. He often whispered in Li Jiuxian's ear that every time Yang Mi shot a movie or worked with a male idol, she would create scandals, hype, and exposure. If her relationship was exposed, it would mean that she would not be able to have any scandals with other male celebrities in the future. She was with him only because she felt lonely and needed a man like him. However, Li Jiuxian deeply believed in her feelings for him. Therefore, no matter what others said, he was still very persistent. However, he had not expected that she would give him such a surprise at today's award ceremony. Under Yang Qi's gentle gaze, he quickly walked onto the stage and gave her a gentle hug. The whole place was in an uproar. Witnessing this rather meaningful confession with their own eyes, everyone was stirred up. Yang Chong. Jiuxian. Yang Chong. Jiuxian. Chapter 3306. Yang Mi kissed him back and hugged his back. When she closed her eyes, tears fell from the corners of her eyes. "Actually, I've been hesitating about whether to announce our relationship. Jiuxian and I have been dating for so long and we've accepted each other. We want to hold hands for the rest of our lives and continue dating. But I'm worried that if we announce our relationship and don't receive blessings, what should I do? I don't want to delay his life." Yang Mi paused and said, "But a good friend told me just now that if I don't want to delay someone else's life, is it okay to delay my own life? So this time, I've decided to be brave. I'm also grateful to the National Drama Festival for giving me such an opportunity to face my feelings bravely." As soon as she said that, there was a round of applause. Unspoken smiled and clapped. When Yang Mi and Li Jiuxian returned to their seats, Unspoken immediately gave her a hug. Yang Mi hugged her back gratefully and thanked her sincerely. Sure, thank you. If she hadn't said that to wake her up, she probably wouldn't have had such impulse and courage until a long time later. Xianxia, I wish you happiness too. Yang Mi returned to her seat. Xianxia was in a daze and seemed to be deep in thought. When she first met Yang Mi, she didn't have a good impression of her. At Huanyu's annual cocktail party, her arrogance and unfriendliness gave her a taste of the hostility and unfriendliness of the entertainment industry. However, after interacting with her, she realized that Yang Mi wasn't a bad person. She was just a little selfish. The glory she had made her arrogant and unavoidably arrogant. But weren't humans selfish too? Instinctively, they resisted outsiders and guarded against them. She had been in the industry for many years and had some dark history, such as the unspoken rules and throwing herself at an investor. But now, after many years of settling down, Yang Mi's temper had been tempered and she was no longer as arrogant and despotic as before. Even when she was in confinement after giving birth, Yang Mi often came to visit and asked about her well-being. The most touching thing in life was to turn hostility into friendship. Xianxia was sincerely happy for her. Next, we will be presenting the Best Supporting Actress of the Year. Please look at the big screen. As soon as Xianxia's photo was shown on the screen and in the slideshow, the audience immediately went into an uproar. Many celebrities arrived a little late, so they did not see Xianxia on the red carpet. Therefore, when they saw the photo on the big screen, they were inevitably surprised. Didn't Xianxia disappear for a long time? Was she also at the award ceremony? Some time ago, Xianxia's Lethal Beauty was replayed for the second time, and the ratings were still at the top. Many netizens left messages for Xianxia to watch it again. Even though the rebroadcast was not scheduled for prime time, but at 10 p.m., there were still many people waiting in front of the TV on time to watch it. The popularity of the ratings increased the value of many of the main actors. This time, because of Qin Chang'el's role in Lethal Beauty, Lin Ji became popular again. She was nominated for Best Actress, but she lost to Yang Mi. However, she didn't lose out. After all, with Lethal Beauty, Lin Ji's status was stabilized. Even her endorsement fees doubled. Lin Ji laughed even in her dreams. The MC returned to the front of the stage and picked up the card, but pretended to be mysterious. I think I saw a face on the screen that I haven't seen in a long time. Chapter 3307. There was a lot of discussion below the stage. Xianxia heard people whispering in the back row. Xianxia is here too? Why is her name in the nomination list? I heard that her popularity in the online voting is too high and she crushed the other candidates. But hasn't Xianxia disappeared for a long time? She wasn't in the voting list at the beginning. Many enthusiastic netizens left comments below and their voices were very loud. Only then did the organizers put her name in. In the end, she took the lead in the voting overnight. If she still doesn't get nominated, the audience will definitely suspect that there's something shady going on, right? But what's the difference between Xianxia's current state and retirement? If she wins the award but doesn't show up, won't it seem very insincere? Won't the other nominees feel uncomfortable? But if she doesn't win the award, with her high popularity, she will definitely be suspected of being shady, right? If that's the case, won't the organizers be in a difficult position? Xianxia didn't come. Amidst the discussion, Xianxia couldn't help but feel a little nervous. She grabbed Mu Yaja's hand tightly and looked at the stage. The MC said in a deep voice, "Next, I'm going to announce the Best Supporting Actress list." Actually, in the National Drama Festival, the most valuable award besides the Best Actress award is the Best Supporting Actress award. Everyone must be very curious about who will be the final winner this year. After a pause, he pretended to be mysterious and said, "First of all, she's a very young girl. Secondly, she has a nickname in our fan group, Beauty of the Century. Although she has disappeared for a long time, her popularity hasn't decreased at all. She's the most popular among the new generation of young actresses." Moreover, with her acting skills, she has gained the recognition of many seniors. The final winner of the Best Supporting Actress Award for the 2017 Jianghu National Drama Festival is Yun. Applause broke out. On the stage, the camera on the big screen changed and landed on her calm face. Although she was a little surprised, this result was within her expectations. She was very confident that her acting skills would definitely be recognized. However, after confirming that she had won the Best Supporting Actress award, she still couldn't hide her excitement. Even though she pretended to be calm on the surface, her trembling fingers showed that she was still very nervous. Yun. Yun is here. Oh my God, has she decided to return to the film and television industry? Impossible. The scene once again shifted to the man beside her. The audience was in an uproar. They had never thought that Wuxia would be there in person. It was said that the Jianghu Financial Group had invested heavily in the sponsorship of the National Drama Festival. However, no one doubted that Yun's award had anything to do with the sponsorship of the Jianghu Financial Group. This was the charm of acting. She had used her acting skills to convince the audience and the judges. She had won this award, which was what everyone expected and deserved. Let's welcome our Beauty of the Century, Ms. Yun, to the stage to receive the award. Yun stood up slowly. Yang Mi, who was sitting beside her, immediately stood up and gave her sincere blessings and a gentle hug. Li Jiuxian also gave her a hug. Yun lifted the hem of her dress and walked gracefully onto the stage. She took the trophy from the guest presenter and smiled shyly. Chapter 3308. The host smiled mysteriously and said, I heard that Yun is not alone today. There was a commotion below the stage. On the big screen, the camera suddenly switched to Wuxia's face. When the latter saw his face suddenly appear on the screen, he raised his eyebrows in surprise and looked around. He was actually looking for the camera seriously. His small action was extremely cute in the eyes of everyone. The audience laughed knowingly. The fans were excited. They stood up, raised their light boards, and shouted in support. Boss! Boss! The attractive couple! The attractive couple! Wuxia and Yun were known as the attractive couple, and the fans affectionately called Wuxia boss. The reason was that Wuxia was the president of Jianghu Financial Group, the big boss. Therefore, they all gave Wuxia such a nickname. The host said enthusiastically, let's applaud a little more. Let's invite the CEO of Jianghu Financial Group to the stage, okay? The applause was extremely intense. Wuxia widened his eyes in shock. He was a little surprised and hesitated whether he should go on stage or not. Yun took the microphone and pretended to be concise and ordered, come up. Wuxia immediately stopped smiling, stood up from his seat, and walked onto the stage. When the host saw this, it took him a long time to react. When Wuxia walked to the front of the stage, Ling Ren's height suddenly dwarfed him. He suddenly stood a little further away and said awkwardly, it's not scary to be on the same stage, but it's awkward to be shorter. There was laughter below the stage. Facing the camera, Wuxia appeared very calm. He naturally hugged Yun and smiled without saying a word. The host teased again, Mr. Mu, I saw you looking around below the stage just now. What were you looking for? Wuxia's lips curled into a bashful smile. Yun immediately chimed in. He's probably looking for a camera. How cute. The host continued, but when CEO Mu went on stage just now, he looked like a young daughter-in-law. Who has the final say at home between you and Chairman Mu? I have the final say. She has the final say. The two of them spoke almost in unison. Pink bubbles suddenly floated in the air as the audience cheered. Among the celebrities present, there were quite a number of single people who could no longer keep their composure. This was clearly a public display of affection. That was too much. The host also smiled and said, since they said it in unison, it looks like it's true. I remember I saw in a news article that CEO Mu appeared on camera at a financial conference. He clearly had the demeanor of a domineering CEO. Why does it feel like he's a henpecked husband when he's beside Xianxia? Mu Yaxia started to lose his cool and protested, no, no. Then let me ask you. The host asked, who has the final say at home? Mu Yaxia said honestly, Madam has the final say. The host beamed and asked again, then, who has the highest status? A certain big boss was obviously being led into a ditch, but he didn't realize it and still answered obediently, Madam has the highest status. Xianxia covered her mouth and snickered. She felt that Mu Yaxia was really too cute. The host asked again, who's in charge of earning money and who's in charge of spending money? Big Boss Mu said again, I'm in charge of earning money and Madam is in charge of spending money. Chapter 3309. The MC replied, oh. She smiled and shook her head. Then she turned around and asked the audience, do you think someone like him is considered a slave to his wife? The audience cheered, yes. The MC asked Xianxia again, Xianxia. Yeah. Was what Mr. Mu said just now true? Are you basically in charge at home now? Xianxia said reservedly, basically, I'm in charge of the small things and he's in charge of the big things. Mu Yaxia added quietly, there doesn't seem to be any big issues at home. When Xianxia heard this, she broke into laughter. The MC pressed on and asked, then, do you have a higher status in your family? A little, but just a little. In our family now, the one with the highest status is still the little princess. The little princess. The MC widened her eyes exaggeratedly and exclaimed, I haven't heard about it. When did you have a daughter? She's already 7 months old. 7 months. She's going to turn 1 soon. However, I think that Xianxia has never exposed her daughter in front of the cameras to protect her. It's said that once a woman becomes a mother, she will gain the charm that only mothers have. I think our Xianxia is a little different from before. Xianxia smiled. What's the difference? The gentleness of a mother. Xianxia blinked and said, wasn't I gentle in the past? The audience laughed knowingly. Xianxia and the MC interacted tacitly. The MC paused and looked at Mu Yaxia again. Now, it's Mr. Mu's turn to take the test. When Mu Yaxia heard this, he thought it was a little strange. He raised his eyebrows and asked, what test? The MC pulled him aside mysteriously and said in a low voice, after the little princess is born, in Mr. Mu's heart, is his wife or his daughter higher? Mu Yaxia said almost without thinking, his wife. When the MC heard this, she snorted and looked like she didn't believe him. He turned around and asked Xianxia, Xianxia, are you satisfied with his answer? No. Xianxia snickered and said, this answer doesn't count. The MC was interested and raised her eyebrows. Oh. There's something fishy. Xianxia raised the microphone and replied, at home, he will dote on his daughter. What about the 2 young masters? He will especially like daughters more, so in his heart, daughters will definitely have a higher status. Mu Yaxia's lips curled into a helpless smile as he wiped the corner of his lips with his fingertips, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. There was an uproar. To everyone's surprise, though, the man actually preferred his daughter over his son. The host smiled and said, it said that this daughter was her father's lover in his previous life. Xianxia smiled shyly, but Mu Yaxia continued, in my heart, Madam is still the most important. Because now, all the happiness I have is because of her. I'm very lucky to have her in my life. She just happened to appear in my world at the right time. Chapter 3310. Mu Yaxia smiled as he hugged the back of her neck and planted a kiss on her forehead. Congratulations. Congratulations, my wife. Xianxia was so touched that she almost cried. She hugged him tightly, surprised and happy. Until the two of them walked off the stage hand in hand, the crowd's envious gazes followed them. Lin Ji's eyes were filled with jealousy. However, jealousy was one thing. After experiencing some things, she had calmed down a lot. She knew that no matter how unwilling she was, some people should not be touched. After all, she knew that, while Unspoken was weak, the man behind her was not to be trifled with, and he was definitely not a good person. Unspoken was his reverse scale and his Achilles heel. She would not do anything stupid again. After all, she had learned her lesson. Lin Ji turned away and did not look at her. Returning to her seat, Yang Mi looked at her with tears in her eyes and gave her a warm hug. "Sure, you're so lucky. I wish you the best too. Congratulations." "Thank you." Unspoken glanced at Yang Mi and Li Jiuxian and asked, "How about you two? Since you've announced your relationship, when do you plan to get married?" Li Jiuxian smiled gratefully. He had heard from Yang Mi that it was Unspoken who gave her the courage to announce it on such a sacred occasion. He held Yang Mi's hand and smiled at her. "There's no rush. After all, we've just announced our relationship. If we get married immediately, the fans will be unprepared. Moreover, I promised Mi Fu that I would give her a sacred wedding. No matter how big or small, we need to prepare seriously. This can't be rushed." Yang Mi added, Sure, once the wedding date is confirmed, I'll send you an invitation immediately. You must come. Sure. Unspoken smiled mischievously. I wonder if the sisters group is still looking for people. Yang Mi was overwhelmed by the favor. With Unspoken's current status, she was no longer someone she could invite. However, since she had taken the initiative to say that she wanted to join the sisters group, she was naturally more than willing. Sure. As long as you are willing to come, of course you can. Yang Mi then asked Mu Yaja, Chairman Mu, are you coming too? If she's going, I'll naturally go too. What an honor. In front of Mu Yaja, Yang Chang finally relaxed a little. After the National Drama Festival ended, many celebrities rushed to accept media interviews. Unspoken was tired, so she turned down the interview and took a private jet back to Jianghu that very night. By the time she reached the capital, it was already early in the morning. When she got home and finished washing up, she was so tired that she lay on the bed. As soon as her head touched the pillow, she fell asleep. When Mu Yaja saw how tired she looked, he couldn't bear to torment her any longer and hugged her to sleep. The next day, Mu Yaja went to work as usual. Unspoken only woke up in the afternoon. She walked into the cloakroom and found Yu wiping the trophy she brought back yesterday. Seeing that she was awake, Yu smiled happily. Lazy mommy, you're finally awake? Oh, I woke up hungry. Unspoken rubbed her flat belly and said pitifully, Yu, did you save any good food for mommy? Of course. You can starve anyone, but you can't starve mommy. Oh right, sis, I've breastfed her. I've changed her diapers too. Yu rebuked her. She's sleeping now. Mommy, don't disturb her afternoon nap. I know. Chapter 33:11. While Yu was cooking the noodles, Unspoken sneaked into the baby's room and peeked at Yueyao. Sure enough, she saw her lying in the crib, sleeping soundly. She had her thumb in her mouth and was sleeping soundly. Unspoken carefully removed her finger from her mouth. Yueyao opened her mouth, and with a pop, a light blister popped out of her mouth. The blister was huge. She found it extremely rare. She gently poked it with her finger and the bubble burst just like that. Yueyao subconsciously put her finger in her mouth again with relish. Unspoken decided to ignore her. She got up and quietly left the room. After eating lunch, which was not considered lunch, Unspoken walked to the cloakroom to choose her clothes. In the afternoon, Mu Xi arrived. Unspoken had already prepared everything. When she saw Mu Xi, she passed the necklace in the gift box to her and said, "Take a look." She took it curiously and opened the box, only to see a beautiful necklace lying quietly inside. It's an item that I'm going to auction at tonight's charity banquet." As Xianxia spoke, she pretended to be heartbroken and held her chest. "To be honest, I can't bear to part with it. I quite like this necklace. Wouldn't it be a pity to auction it off for nothing?" Shi's lips trembled. She looked up at Xianxia and opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Xianxia kept staring at the necklace and was reluctant to part with it, so she did not notice her expression. After Shi was done with her makeup, she changed into a simple dress. This dress was custom-made by a famous designer, but it was not considered an evening gown. It was a typical socialite style. Attending a charity banquet did not have to be considered glamorous, but it was fine as long as one was steady and appropriate. After all, this was not an award ceremony. The focus was on the scenery and decency. The theme was charity, not beauty. Xianxia had noticed Shi's troubled expression for a long time. Ever since she arrived in the afternoon, Shi had been absent-minded. She seemed to want to say something, but she kept hesitating. She asked suspiciously, "What's wrong with you?" I see that you've been absent-minded, as if you have something on your mind." Xianxia gestured for her to sit on the sofa. Shi hesitated for a long time before dawdling over to her side and sitting down. However, she still looked restless. The air conditioning in the room was clearly turned on, yet her forehead was still covered in cold sweat. Xianxia thought that she was not feeling well. Not feeling well? No. She hurriedly waved her hands to explain, but her words were incoherent. Xianxia laughed and said, "Shi, if you're not feeling well, you don't have to accompany me. Go home and rest early." Xianxia was concerned from the bottom of her heart. She was really concerned about her and was worried that she was not feeling well, yet she was still putting up a strong front. Shi was upset when she heard this. She looked up, her eyes flickering. Looking at Xianxia's sincere expression, she suddenly felt that she was extremely ugly. Xianxia treated her so well, yet she actually made use of her. Shi clutched the corner of her shirt tightly. Her eyes were red and her lips were trembling badly, but she was holding back her tears. What should I do? Should I be honest with her? Chapter 33:12. She was really conflicted. She kept feeling that no matter what choice she made, it would be wrong. Still, she really did not want to harm her. Still, if she did not do that, she really could not find a second way to save her parents. Still, while her parents' lives were important, was Xianxia's life not important, too? What if she met with danger? God knew what that man would do to her. She was so happy now, with 3 adorable children and a husband who loved her deeply. Was such happiness really going to be destroyed in her hands? But if she did not do that, what else could she do? What else could she do? She couldn't just watch her biological parents die. She really couldn't do it. She suddenly felt conflicted. She desperately wanted to save her parents, but she also began to hesitate. Was her decision right or wrong? If she really harmed Xianxia because of her selfishness, she would definitely suffer retribution and die a horrible death. Shi was at a loss for a moment. She covered her face with her hands in despair as tears kept falling from the gaps between her fingers. Seeing this, Xianxia's expression immediately tensed up. She grabbed her wrist and moved it away, only to see her assistant's reddened eyes. What's wrong? She hurriedly took a wet wipe and wiped her tears seriously. She asked anxiously, Shi, why are you crying? Did something happen? Shi looked at her with reddened eyes. The more she cared, the more guilt and uneasiness in her heart grew. She suddenly bit her lip and wanted to confess to her. Xianxia, my father, however, just as the words reached her throat, they were blocked. She suddenly recalled that man's threat. If she told Shirshir, then her father would really die. Mom would die, too. She hesitated again as she stared at her. Her mouth opened and closed for a long time, but no words came out of it. Shirshir looked at her anxious expression and misunderstood her. What's wrong? What happened to your father? Is he sick? Startled, she turned her face away abruptly and closed her eyes. Slowly nodding, she uttered in a hoarse voice, yes. Shirshir laughed when she heard this. Is it because of this? Why didn't you tell me earlier? As she spoke, she took her wallet from the side. As she rummaged through her wallet, she asked, when did this happen? What's wrong with your father? Is it serious? She nodded with difficulty. Yes. It's a little serious. The medical fees aren't enough, right? That's why you don't look well these days. You must be worried. Shirshir suddenly took out a bank card and handed it to her, saying, there's some money in this card. If you don't mind, you can use it to save yourself. Mushi's eyes fell on the bank card. Tears streamed down her cheeks as her lips trembled violently. I don't want to. How could she accept it? What right did she have to ask for it? She shook her head. I don't want to. Are you being polite with me? Chapter 33:13. I can't take it. Mushi pushed the card back and shook her head frantically. Shirshir, I can't take it from you. Why are you being so polite with me? Just treat it as a loan. My dad. Mushi gritted her teeth and hesitated for a while. In the end, she did not have the courage to tell her everything. Instead, she said with difficulty, my dad is fine. Then, I've noticed that you don't look well these past 2 days. Shirshir smiled. If you're unhappy about something, feel free to tell me. Mushi was flustered. She hurriedly stood up and said, I'll go to the washroom. Oh. Shirshir watched in a daze as she suddenly stood up and hurried into the washroom. She was a little confused. Mushi dashed into the washroom and locked the door from the inside. She held onto the counter for support as tears streamed down her face. She bit her lower lip hard and covered her mouth uneasily. Looking at the mirror, her eyes were redder than ever. Yu walked over and saw Shirshir sitting on the sofa. She was dressed neatly and had light makeup on. He asked curiously, Mommy, are you going out today? Didn't I tell you before that there's a charity banquet tonight? The little lad tilted his head curiously and was a little puzzled. Are you going alone? Shirshir said, Mushi will accompany me. Yu frowned but did not say anything. There was actually no need to attend a charity banquet. Most charity banquets appeared to be for charity on the surface, but they were not serious banquets behind the scenes. Many powerful entrepreneurs would attend charity banquets. Hence, many female celebrities would often use charity banquets as an excuse to travel among the big shots of the business world in search of potential investors. If they could hook up with a potential investor, it meant that they would have a meteoric rise in their career. Many entertainment companies would also try their best to push their artistes into such banquets in order to broaden their network. These entrepreneurs, under the guise of charity, could establish a positive image in front of the public by doing charity on the surface. Behind the scenes, they could use this banquet to look for potential partners. It was the best of both worlds. Still, since Mushi was with him, he believed that nothing would go wrong. Yu asked, when is Mommy coming back? I'll be back as soon as the party is over. Just as she finished speaking, Mushi walked out of the washroom. She smiled at Shirshir and said, Shirshir, the car is waiting for us. Let's go. Shirshir nodded and said to her, wait, I'll go get the necklace. Mushi's face froze for a moment before she nodded unnaturally. Shirshir took out the jewelry box, only to see her assistant standing at the door, biting her nails nervously. She furrowed her brows. Mushi, what's wrong? I'm afraid I won't make it in time. Didn't you say 8 o'clock in the evening? Go early, or you'll be late. As she spoke, she held Shusher's hand and said, let's go. Shusher did not think much of it. She nodded and followed her assistant to the entrance of the villa. She looked around but did not see the waiting car. Curious, she asked, where's the car? It's parked on Zongheng Road. So far? Zongheng Road was a kilometer away from here. Why was it parked so far away? Chapter 33:14. She did not know that because Xiangdi Walk was surrounded by surveillance cameras, the car was parked in a secluded area to avoid being noticed. Mu, she said, security is tight here. No parking is allowed at the entrance. As she spoke, she added, Shusher, let's go. Don't be late. Shusher gradually had doubts in her heart, but when she saw Mu Shi's face, she trusted her completely and did not doubt her. Along the way, Mu Shi was a little quiet. Shusher was even more puzzled when she saw that, for some reason, her forehead was covered in cold sweat and her hands were trembling. Mu Shi. Do you know? You're acting weird today. Mu Shi laughed dryly. Weird? What's weird about it? I see that you're always absent-minded. Your hands are trembling, as if you're guilty of something. Shusher did not mince her words. Mu Shi's heart skipped a beat. Seeing this, Shusher was even more convinced of her judgment. Mu Shi, you're hiding something from me. This sentence made the already guilty Mu Shi's heart beat even faster. She turned her face away, feeling even more embarrassed. Shusher, what nonsense are you talking about? What can I hide from you? If I knew, I wouldn't be so curious. Shusher suddenly asked, Mu Shi, could it be that you've encountered something that you're too embarrassed to talk about? No, I thought that I should be the person you trust the most. Pausing for a moment, she continued slowly, but you rarely mention anything to me when you're in a difficult situation. Could it be that I'm not trustworthy? How is that possible? Mu Shi retorted. Shusher, don't let your imagination run wild. Mu Shi, I really want to help you. Shusher smiled. Do you know? I trust you a lot, so I want to be the person you trust, too. Mu Shi looked at her in a daze. Looking at Shusher's gentle eyes, her heart wavered for a moment. She clenched her fists tightly and trembled all over. Not far away, a black car slowly drove over. Mu Shi turned her head to take a look at the car's license plate. Knowing that someone was here, her eyes darkened. Shusher turned around and glanced at the car. She asked curiously, is that the car? Mu Shi remained silent. When the car stopped steadily beside Shusher, the car door opened and two men in black suits stepped out. Shusher couldn't help but take a few steps back in shock. She was shocked, not because the car appeared too suddenly, but because there was a very cold murderous aura on the two men. He gave off a feeling that he had come with ill intentions. The two men walked up to Shusher and said coldly, "Get in the car." Her cold tone made her feel conflicted. She took a few steps back and looked at her assistant, only to see the latter turn around all of a sudden and open her mouth, seemingly mouthing something to her. Run, run, she was so nervous that she was sweating profusely. Shusher frowned but didn't understand. Mu Shi, what did you say? Mu Shi gritted her teeth in confusion. Before she could walk toward her, the two men behind her had already taken a few steps toward her. Shusher looked at them warily. What are you doing? Get in the car. How do I know who you are and where you're taking me? Shusher looked at her assistant. Mu Shi, who are they? Chapter 33:15. Run. Mu Shi screamed hysterically all of a sudden. She rushed over, grabbed Shusher's hand, and ran in the opposite direction. Shusher was stunned and did not understand what had happened. However, when she saw Mu Shi's nervous expression, she also became nervous and subconsciously ran with all her might. However, they were women, after all. Muxi was wearing sports shoes and could run fast, but Unparalleled was wearing wedge heels and could not run fast at all. Unparalleled heard the footsteps behind her and nervously kicked her high heels further away and ran barefoot. Her feet were scraped by the cement floor and were bleeding. However, in less than 10 seconds, they were quickly caught up by 2 men in black. One in front and one behind, they surrounded them. Muxi became nervous and immediately reached out to block Unparalleled. She looked at them in shock. "What are you guys trying to do? Hand her over." "No!" Muxi shrieked. "You can't take her away. Don't forget your deal with the boss." One of the men threatened coldly. "Take her away and we'll let your parents go. This is the agreement in the deal." Muxi bit her lip hard and stood firmly in front of Unparalleled. Her eyes were red. "You can't hurt her. You're not allowed to say anything, this is an order." One of the men kicked her away and she fell to the ground. Unparalleled was about to help her up when the other man stepped forward and pulled her in front of him. He took out a pair of handcuffs and tied her hands behind her back, not allowing her to struggle. Muxi shrieked when she saw this. "No!" Unparalleled was even more baffled. She did not know what kind of drama was going on. Why would 2 men appear out of nowhere with such menacing looks? She panted and questioned, "Who are you guys?" "Unparalleled, our boss wants to see you. Tie me up and bring me to see him." Compared to Muxi's panic, Unparalleled was much calmer. She sneered and said, "Is this your boss's sincerity? This is the boss's order. What's your motive?" Unparalleled looked at Muxi and asked anxiously, "Muxi, what's going on?" Muxi was scared out of her wits. Trembling, she broke down and cried, "Unparalleled, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." She kept apologizing desperately, but Unparalleled was even more confused. She did not know what she was apologizing for. "Why are you apologizing?" "Unparalleled, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm really at my wit's end, that's why I'm feeling dizzy. What exactly are you talking about?" Before Unparalleled could understand the situation, the man behind her grabbed her hair and pulled her toward the car. "Let go!" she roared, "Don't touch me." Unparalleled. Muxi pounced forward and knelt in front of the 2 men. She kept kowtowing and begging, "Don't hurt her. I'm begging you. I'm begging you. She's innocent." The man kicked her away. Muxi clutched her chest and fell to the side. When she saw Unparalleled being stuffed into the car, she endured the pain and pounced on the car door. "I'll go with you, okay? Let her go. Please let her go." Chapter 33:16. However, the man ignored her and slammed the car door shut. Her hand was pinched hard by the door. Muxi let out a shrill shriek. The man walked in front of her and kicked her in the chest. The next moment, her body was like a piece of broken paper as she flew out and hit the stone wall at the side. The back of her head hit the stone wall hard. An earth-shattering darkness enveloped her. Her body went limp and she slid down the wall to the ground. Her eyelids drooped loosely. The car door closed. Unparalleled nervously pressed herself against the window. She looked at Muxi, who was lying on the ground, and shouted something. However, the car's soundproofing was excellent, so her voice could not be heard. Muxi tried to lift her heavy eyelids, but she could only watch as the black car sped away and disappeared from her sight. Unparalleled, Yu sat in the study, feeling uneasy. Ever since Unparalleled left, he felt uneasy for some reason, as if something big was about to happen. This was probably the magical telepathy between mother and son. On the other hand, he felt that Muxi was too strange today. She looked absent-minded, evasive, and inexplicably guilty. He inadvertently caught her looking at Unparalleled with remorse, pity, and guilt in her eyes. This made him feel that something was amiss. He sent Li Hanlin to investigate the charity banquet, but there was still no reply. Impatient of waiting, he called again to urge him. Li Hanlin quickly found some clues. "I've checked all the channels, but there's no news of a charity banquet being held in the capital tonight." Hearing this, Yu stood up abruptly with a look of astonishment. "What? Yu, the charity banquet you mentioned doesn't exist. What's wrong? What's your motive for asking about this?" "My mommy said," Yu suddenly felt his throat go dry. "My mommy said that we're going to attend a charity banquet tonight." "Impossible." Li Hanlin said, "There's no charity banquet, how is that possible?" "Shit," Yu suddenly realized something. Just as she was about to hang up the call, she suddenly thought of something and ordered, "Wuxia Hanlin, check this person's IP address for me right now. Find out what's her IP address." "Yes, I understand." Sensing the anxiety in his tone, Li Hanlin didn't ask any more questions and immediately agreed. Yu rushed out of the door and chased after Unspoken. At the fork in the road, he deliberated for a few times and a road map appeared in his mind. One road led to the city center, while the other led to the remote southern suburbs. He immediately ran along the secluded road the next day. After running for an unknown amount of time, he saw a person lying on the ground from afar. He was shocked and immediately chased after her. It was only when he got closer that he realized that Wuxia was unconscious on the ground. "Wuxia." Yu stopped in his tracks and walked toward her. After the vigorous exercise, he suddenly stopped. His heart skipped a beat as he felt his heart palpitate. He frowned and clutched his chest tightly. He staggered to her side and half-knelt on the ground, his body on the verge of collapsing. He endured the discomfort and reached out to pat her face. "Wake up." For a long time, there was no reaction from her. Chapter 33:17. Yu leaned against the wall weakly until he saw a pair of high heels lying on the floor not far away. He immediately forced himself to walk over and pick them up. He immediately recognized them as his mommy's high heels. He would occasionally tidy up the cloakroom for his mommy, so he recognized them. "Oh no," Yu immediately called Li Hanlin, but the other party replied that they could only trace the IP address to an overseas IP. Hence, their ability was limited and they could not find the final IP address. Even Li Hanlin could not find it. It seemed that this had something to do with the dark web. A white light flashed across Yu's mind. He realized something and immediately called Gong Jia via video call. The video call was quickly connected. Gong Jia was a little surprised that he would take the initiative to call, but before he could ask, Yu quickly explained the situation to him succinctly. The more it was like this, the calmer Yu was. He knew very well that if he lost his composure, the situation would be even more out of control. Yu said in a low voice, "I suspect that this matter has something to do with Daoist." Gong Jia's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He immediately said, "If it's really Daoist's doing, then sister is temporarily safe. His target must be you. Yu, protect yourself well. I'll start investigating right away." "Okay." Yu ended the call and sent a location to Wuxia. However, he soon fainted from exhaustion. After Unspoken was forced into the car, her hands were tied behind her back, her eyes were blindfolded, and her mouth was taped. However, even if they did not seal her mouth, she would not foolishly scream. The car drove for a long time. She was on tenterhooks as she did not know where this car was taking her. Kidnapping? Unspoken thought carefully and felt that there were many suspicious points about Wuxia. Especially today, when she stammered and evaded the topic. She looked very guilty, but for some reason, her gaze toward her was filled with regret and hesitation. Previously, when she gave her the invitation, her expression was very strange. She wanted to give it but did not want to at the same time. When she said that she did not want to attend, Mushi looked very anxious. When she said that she wanted to attend, Mushi's eyes were filled with hesitation and regret. Although it was a charity banquet, the car in charge of picking her up was so far away and so remote. Moreover, when the car stopped beside her, Mushi seemed to know that something like this would happen. She even mouthed the words to tell her to run. Xianxia recalled the conversation between the two men and Mushi. Deal and agreement, these two terms clearly indicated that Mushi and these two men knew each other. She was betrayed? Thinking of this possibility, she bit her lower lip in despair. She trusted her assistant so much, but in the end, the person closest to her betrayed her. At this thought, Xianxia's heart turned cold. It was as if her blood had been sucked away. Along the way, she kept calculating the distance in her heart. The car drove for more than half an hour. At this speed, they had driven about 60 kilometers. Finally, the car came to a steady stop and she was forced out. Immediately after, she heard the sound of a ship's engine. The pier? The port? Judging the time, it was already evening. Chapter 33:18. She struggled repeatedly as the two men held her down on both sides. According to Mushi, the charity banquet was held on a cruise ship. Could it be that they were going to send her on a cruise ship? If that was the case, it would be impossible for her to escape from the vast sea. Should she jump into the sea? That was the same as courting death. To her, a cruise ship was simply a prison on the sea. Her struggles were not worth mentioning to the two men. The more she struggled, the more ruthless they became. With a chop of a hand, she only felt a dull pain at the back of her neck. Her brain instantly went numb and she fainted. When she woke up again, she opened her eyes and found herself in a luxurious room. The thing that was used to cover her eyes and seal her mouth was gone. Beside her, a group of unfamiliar women were busy. Just as she was about to sit up, she realized that the handcuffs on her wrists were still there. She had a splitting headache. It seemed that the man had used too much force in his chop, resulting in the aftereffects. Her head was throbbing with pain as if her brain was turning upside down. Suddenly, she felt something strange on her body. Half of her shoulder was exposed to the air. She looked down. She didn't know when, but someone had changed her into a dress. It was a strapless fishtail dress that accentuated her exquisite figure. The exquisite and gorgeous outfit made it seem as if she had not been kidnapped but that there was an important and eye-catching banquet waiting for her. "What are you doing?" Xianxia questioned them sternly. "What exactly are you doing?" However, the few women in front of her did not seem to hear her. They did not even turn their heads as they busied themselves with the things at hand. Xianxia could not help but wonder if they did not exist in the same space as her, or if they were all deaf and could not hear her. A woman dressed as a servant walked over with an expensive diamond necklace in her hand. It seemed that she was going to put it on her. Xianxia struggled to retreat and shouted at her at the top of her lungs, "Get lost! Don't touch me!" She shouted so loudly, but the woman in front of her still did not seem to hear her. She was like a puppet that had been wound up and had no emotions of her own. The more this kind of environment was, the more creepy it was. Looking at the expressionless women who looked like walking corpses in front of her, Xianxia's heart fell into the abyss of despair. Who could tell her what was going on? "What are you trying to do?" Her voice trembled violently as she stared straight at her. She watched helplessly as she tied the diamond chain around her ankle. It was an anklet? The cold touch made people feel that the beauty of the diamond was extremely strange. The soundproofing of the room was very good. However, Xianxia looked around and could vaguely tell that they were on a cruise ship. That was because she could vaguely hear the sound of wind and waves outside the room. On the deck, there were people walking to and fro. Every footstep made her tremble in fear. There was a kind of despair of being alone and helpless, immediately surrounding her. "Help, save me, she shouted helplessly in her heart, but she didn't dare to shout. Every minute and every second passed extremely slowly. However, she didn't know what she was about to face. Chapter 33:19. After the women packed up their things, they left one after another. She was the only one left in the huge and luxurious room. Unspoken was in a state of torment. She leaned against the headboard and shivered. She wanted to stay calm, but forgive her. In such an unfamiliar and cold environment, she didn't know if this would be the last moment of her life. After an unknown amount of time, the sound of footsteps came from outside the room. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and the next second, someone pushed the door open and walked in. She saw 2 rows of black-clothed men enter in a single file. The last man who walked in wore a long coat and combed his hair back. He looked old, about 50 years old. His face was full of wrinkles. At the same time, a ferocious-looking blade stretched across half of his face. His facial features were deep, and it was obvious that he wasn't of Asian descent. He wore sunglasses and held a cigar between his fingers. He looked aggressive, and it was obvious that he was a vicious person. One's appearance was born from one's heart. She believed in this saying. Some evil people could be told at a glance that they were evil people who committed all kinds of crimes. For example, this man had a pair of thick, messy eyebrows and downturned lips, giving people an unapproachable feeling. His subordinates seemed to be in awe of him. They kept their heads down and didn't dare to look him in the eye. Unspoken looked at him, and her heart skipped a beat. She guessed that it must have been her idea to kidnap her here. She sized him up for a while, and the man was doing the same. He stared at her for a while through his sunglasses. Even with the sunglasses, it couldn't hide his sinister gaze. It was hair-raising. Unspoken was a little shocked by his gaze. Her lips trembled as she gritted her teeth and asked, "Who exactly are you?" The man exhaled a puff of smoke. He narrowed his eyes and took off his sunglasses. His eyes were like an eagle's beak, and they were aggressive. When he opened his mouth, a thick smoke came out. However, what came out of his mouth was an authentic American accent in English. This woman's model isn't bad. Unspoken knew that he didn't understand English, so she questioned him in fluent English, "Who are you?" "Oh. You can speak English." The man was a little surprised. He raised his hand and took another deep puff of the cigar. Amidst the smoke, he looked at her again and seemed to be very satisfied. "You don't need to know who I am." "Then, why did you bring me here?" "Huh. You don't have to ask about this." "Why can't I ask?" The man smiled coldly and snorted, "Because you are an object. Because you are an item. An object doesn't need to think." Unspoken's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. She was even more confused and couldn't figure out what his purpose was. Item? She was not an object at all. Unspoken wanted to say something, but the man turned around and quickly left the room. The door closed again, isolating her from the world. Unspoken sat on the spot in a daze, her heart in a state of extreme panic. The sound of the waves outside the window became clearer and clearer. She closed her eyes in despair. She only hoped that she would be taken away from here as soon as possible. When Yu woke up, he was in the hospital. Wuxia and Xiao Yichen were sitting by the bed. When they saw that he had woken up, they immediately surrounded him. Chapter 33:20. Xiao Yichen asked, Yu, are you all right? By the time Daddy and I arrived, you had already fainted. You scared me out of my wits. Yu immediately sat up and surveyed his surroundings. Realizing that he was in a hospital, he asked anxiously, what time is it now? 9 p.m. 9 p.m.? It had been 3 hours since they lost contact with his mother. Yu broke out in a cold sweat. He did not know if his mother was safe or not. For 3 hours, no news was the best news. He suspected that this was Dietrich's doing. If that was the case, then he must have taken his mother away to target him. What if that was not the case? If the person who kidnapped Mommy wasn't Dietrich, then Mommy's safety wouldn't be guaranteed. Where is she? Yu immediately looked up. Where's Mushi? Mu Yaja coldly replied, she's already awake. Is she under control? Yes, she's right outside. Yu immediately lifted the blanket and got out of bed. He did not even bother to put on his shoes as he walked to the door. Mushi had woken up and was sitting on the bench with a dazed look on her face. 3 or 4 men stood around her, watching her intently. Yu's face turned cold when he saw her. He quickly walked up to her, grabbed her collar, and pulled her to him. Mommy trusted you so much, but what about you? What did you do to her? Yu enunciated each word clearly. You betrayed her. You betrayed her. Mushi's face broke down when she heard this. Tears rolled down her cheeks continuously. I know, but I really had no choice. I didn't want to. I don't want to hear this nonsense. Yu questioned sternly, who took Mommy away? Who are those people? Tell me everything you know. Mushi shook her head in despair. I don't know. I really don't know anything. Just now, Mu Yaja had interrogated him, but he didn't get any useful information. Mushi told him everything she knew and what she could, but the information she got was very little. Mu Yaja did not know what had happened. Mushi was incoherent throughout and could not provide any information. That person only asked me to send Xianxia to the port under the pretext of attending the charity banquet. I didn't want to at first, but he video called me. I saw with my own eyes my father being tied up in the dark room and one of his fingers being chopped off while he was still alive. Mushi recalled that scene and was scared out of her wits. She immediately agreed to do as he instructed. That person said that if she didn't do as he asked, he wouldn't be able to guarantee what he would do to her father in the next video call. This is too cruel. She cried herself hoarse. I was scared out of my wits. I was scared, so I acted foolishly. I know I'm in the wrong, I know I'm in the wrong. I didn't know it would cause such serious consequences. Yu was even more furious. Then, why didn't you say anything? Since you know that that person is cruel, how can you bear to put my mommy through a mountain of swords and a sea of fire? Mushi was stunned and her tears flowed even more violently. I don't want to see your hypocritical tears. Chapter 33:21. Mushi trembled in fear. Even though the person standing before her was no more than 8 years old, the aura he exuded was enough to stun her. Mu Yaja pulled him into his embrace and gently caressed his hair as he consoled, Yu, don't be afraid, even though, at this moment, his heart was in a mess. Yu trembled in anger. He thought of how heartbroken his mommy would be if she found out that he had been betrayed by Mu Shi. Mu Yichen said, Yu, don't worry. No news is the best news for now. It's just that we're all in the dark now. We can't find Mommy's whereabouts, let alone know who the mastermind is. Still, I think that the mastermind is using Mommy as a hostage to negotiate with someone. After a pause, he asked Mu Yaja suspiciously, Daddy, have you offended anyone recently? Mu Yaja pursed his lips and shook his head. No. Yu clenched his fists and said solemnly, maybe. I'm right. What? It must be Dietrich. His sixth sense could not be wrong. His phone rang all of a sudden. Yu thought that it was a video call from Gongjia. He quickly took out his phone, only to see an unfamiliar IP call pop up on the screen. His heart skipped a beat and he picked it up without hesitation. Following the frequency of the call, the video gradually changed. In the video, a man was sitting on a chair, and a ferocious face came into view. He. Little guy, how have you been? Mu Yaja furrowed his brows in shock. This man's face was very unfamiliar, so he naturally could not recognize him. However, this did not mean that Yu could not recognize him. Daitris? Yu had not seen Daitris's face before, so he raised a brow in suspicion. So smart. I couldn't believe it. I even doubted if the legendary genius of the Hurricane Group was really only 8 years old. I only believed it when I saw it with my own eyes. In the video, Daitris was in a dark environment, which was probably used to store miscellaneous items on the cruise ship. Even though the video's resolution was limited, he could still see the dust flying in the air. She raised her head when she heard the voice. Even though his voice when he spoke to her earlier, it was too easy to recognize this man's voice. It was gloomy, hoarse, and chilling. It's him. She recognized him. She moved closer to the phone and stared at the man's face as she yelled, "What did you do to Xianxia?" She was speaking in Chinese, but Daitris didn't understand Chinese, so he misunderstood her meaning. "Do you want to see your parents?" "Sure." Daitris signaled with his eyes, and the camera quickly turned to the other side. Under the dim light, She saw with her own eyes that her parents were tied to an iron pillar with iron chains tightly binding them. There were no injuries on their bodies. It seemed that Daitris did not torture them too much. However, after being imprisoned for a long time, their mental state looked terrible. Their heads were hung low, and it was unknown if they were awake or unconscious. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Yu finally understood why She did this. It turned out that Daitris had kidnapped her parents. Despicable. Shameless. Cunning old fox. Chapter 33-22. She's facial muscles twitched as she gritted her teeth. Hating this man to the core, she shouted at the top of her lungs, "Let them go now." Yu replied coldly, "He won't let them go." "What? Who do you think he is? A philanthropist? Don't even think about living once they're in his hands." The next second, Daitris's voice was heard in the video. "According to our agreement, I should have let them go. However, it's a pity that you've broken your promise. Our deal is no longer valid. What I promised you naturally doesn't count either." She, who did not understand English, was at a loss. However, she soon saw two men step forward and untie the ropes binding them. They then fell limply to the ground. "Ah," she cried out nervously. She saw two men holding her father and mother by the collar and walking to a cabin door. They opened the cabin door, and as the cruise ship sailed through the wind and waves, the blue waves came into view. She finally understood what this man was trying to do. She screamed, "No!" Before she could finish her words, the man in the video kicked her mother out of the door. Her body sank heavily into the sea and was quickly swallowed by it. She watched this scene in disbelief. She fell to the ground in a daze as big drops of tears rolled down her cheeks. Her whole body trembled violently as she looked at the camera again. In the video, She's father woke up abruptly. He looked at the man and opened his mouth to scream, "Ah, ah, ah." She thought that he was too frightened to speak, but Yu knew very well that the reason he was screaming was not just out of fear but because his tongue had been cut off. How cruel. Yu clenched his fists tightly. The next second, She's father was pushed out of the door. His body sank into the sea, but he quickly floated up. He kept struggling, but he was soon swallowed by the waves created by the cruise ship. She broke down and screamed, "No!" The cabin door was closed. Daitris's cruel methods were hair-raising. Chen was dumbfounded as his heart clenched tightly. He was not in the mood to care about She's parents. Instead, he was worried about Xianxia's safety. Daitris was vicious and merciless. He did not say a word of nonsense. Just like the scene just now, he was ruthless and decisive. There was almost no hesitation in killing them. It was as if two lives were as lowly as grass in his eyes. There was no doubt about this, though. After all, he was the boss behind the dark web. His business of kidnapping women from all over the world and selling them at a high price. Even Mui Chen, who had seen many deaths, was frightened out of his wits by this scene. Yu Yu gritted his teeth. Where's my mommy? Do you want to see her? Daitris laughed coldly. But unfortunately, she will be the highlight of the auction. Auction? The boy was shocked. What do you want? This lunatic. Daitris, she's death, do you know? I lost a total of 3 billion USD because of you. Yu Yu pursed his lips tightly and said in a low voice, 3 billion, is it? I'll compensate you. Oh? Do you have the money to do that? Give me one night, I'll prepare it immediately. Chapter 33:23. One night? Huh. I can't wait that long. Daitris proposed a deal. I'll only give you 2 hours. 2 hours, it was impossible to prepare so much cash at once. Daitris was demanding an exorbitant price. It was not that he did not have the ability to fulfill it, but the reality was that it was already the middle of the night. Even if there was an account turnover, there would be backstage operations. What he wanted was cash. Where would he get so much? 3 billion USD? Not every bank had such a shocking amount of foreign reserves. Moreover, the banks were closed now. If he urgently informed the bank management that he needed to withdraw 3 billion USD in cash, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Moreover, he had to appear at the port in 2 hours. Otherwise, his mother's safety would be in danger. However, if he relied on the Hurricane Group, 3 billion would not be difficult. As far as he knew, most of the transactions of the Hurricane Group were cash transactions. Therefore, for the Hurricane Group, it would not be difficult to come up with 3 billion in cash. However, it would take some time for the Gong Jia to arrive from the Hurricane Group. Daitris said, remember, I want cash. 2 hours later, I'll send someone to pick you up at the port. If you can't wait for the 3 billion, don't blame me. It's not like I didn't give you a chance. You could not care less and agreed immediately. Okay. I promise you. Remember, 2 hours later, you have to come alone with cash. If you bring someone else, my bullets won't have eyes. Daitris was very cunning. He knew that one more person meant one more danger. If it was a child, he could still control it. However, if he brought an adult, there would be more uncertainty. He was not stupid enough to take the risk. I want to see the person first. Yu requested. Daitris laughed when he heard that. You think I'm negotiating with you? We're both businessmen. You've put forward your terms, so why can't I put forward my terms? You're wrong. This is not a transaction. Even if it's a ransom, you have to let me see that the person is safe. Dream on. Daitris was firm. Remember, I'm only giving you 2 hours. If you don't come in 2 hours, you can wait to collect the corpse. Huh. At the last moment of the video, it stopped at Daitris's cold and arrogant laughter. After ending the call, Yu bit her lip and looked up at Wuxia. Daddy, can you prepare so much cash within an hour? 3 billion? Wuxia took a deep breath. Time is a little tight, but it's not like we can't think of a way. What he said meant that it was impossible to raise so much cash within an hour. He was well aware of Wuxia's financial situation. He had 3 billion USD in foreign exchange reserves. However, even if he had the authority, it was impossible for him to withdraw so much cash in such a short time. Daitris was giving him a hard time. What did this mean? It meant that he already had a plan for the next step. There's no time. Yu said, if you really don't have enough time to prepare, it's okay. I'll go alone. No. Wuxia rejected her without thinking. How are you going to get there? If he went alone, he would just be throwing his life away. Chapter 33:24. Of course, it's to negotiate with him. How are you going to negotiate with him if you don't have a single cent? Although Dietress's methods are cruel, he will never make a losing deal. He won't kill me so easily. I'm doing this to buy time. Yu paused for a moment and said, I've already contacted Uncle. If nothing goes wrong, he should be here tomorrow morning. Impossible. Mu Yaja was resolute. Even if someone has to go, it should be me. Daddy, the person Dietress wants to meet is me. This is between him and me. Mommy's life is in his hands now. You won't be of any help if you go. The person Dietress wanted was him. He knew very well that if Mu Yaja rashly went, he would only anger that cunning old man. But he was different. Dietress was targeting him. He was confident and believed in Mu Yaja and Gong Jia. The purpose of leaving Mu Yaja behind was to let him help Gong Jia. He was going to buy time. Opportunity always came with danger. How could one catch a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den? Yu smirked and said, This is my fault. It's my fault for not killing him. I implicated Mommy. Since that's the case, I should take responsibility. Mu Yaja squatted down and grabbed his shoulders tightly. You want me to watch you take the risk? I won't be stupid enough to do something I'm not confident in. Daddy, don't you know me? Yu pretended to be relaxed. Daddy, don't tell me you don't believe me. Mu Yaja was silent for a moment. Mu Yichen suddenly said, Daddy, I'll go with Yu. No. Yu said, You can't go. You'll be sending yourself to death. Yu, we can't go without either of us. I'll go with you. Trust me, I can definitely protect you and Mommy. Are you crazy? Yu said angrily, Do you know where that is? Do you even understand him? Do you know how dangerous a person he is? You say it so casually, but the real situation is very dangerous, do you understand? Of course I know. Mu Yichen interrupted him. Holding his hand, he smiled and said, That's why I want to be with you. It's because I know it's very dangerous, so I can't let you go alone. He held Yu's hand tightly, his eyes filled with sincerity. Yu, listen to your brother, okay? Otherwise, I'll feel like a useless person. Yu looked at him and saw the determination in his eyes. He couldn't refuse anymore. The telepathy between the twins allowed him to see Mu Yichen's firm conviction. Suddenly, he held his hand tightly and smiled. Okay, let's go together then. Mu Yichen was elated. Seeing that Yu had finally relented, he nodded heavily. Yu said to Mu Yaja, Daddy, you'll be in charge of sending us to the port. Then, get Uncle as soon as possible. Xiao Yichen and I will be waiting for you. Impossible. Mu Yaja gritted his teeth and said, I can't do it. He couldn't do it if he went with them and his life was uncertain. He couldn't lose any of them. Chapter 33:25. Yu suddenly hugged him and hugged his shoulders. His eyes were red as he said, Daddy, I'm begging you, okay? Trust me this time and trust your two sons' abilities. Mu Yaja clenched his fists tightly. He suddenly released them and gently hugged the two little lads. Wait for me. Okay. 2:00 in the morning. It was midnight. The night was dark and gloomy. Dark clouds covered the moon and it looked like it was going to rain heavily. The car sent Yu and Xiao Yichen to the harbor early and left quickly. Xiao Yichen held onto Yu's hand tightly and didn't want to let go. The two little lads stood at the harbor. The night wind was very strong and the cold sea breeze made their cheeks hurt. Yu, do you know? Actually, I'm not stupid at all. Most of the time, I know a lot. It's not like I don't know how to solve those math problems. Yu was stunned and turned to look at him. Memories of their first encounter flashed through his mind. The two of them sat on the Ferris wheel and faced each other. He clumsily counted with his fingers in front of Yu when they were faced with a math problem. Yu mocked him mercilessly. You're not smart enough, so you're using your height to make up for it? From the first time they met, Xiao Yichen had the impression that he was stupid. What's 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 plus 10? I'll give you 10 seconds to figure it out. Little Yichen immediately began to count them one by one with a serious look on his face. Yu looked at him speechlessly. He thought to himself, did this brother of mine really come from the same womb as me? How can he be so stupid? But what was the truth? Xiao Yichen wasn't stupid. On the contrary, he was very smart and knew how to pretend to be stupid. That was why he had an excuse to pester Yu and kept asking him to teach him math problems. At that time, Yu wasn't close to him and his daddy. It seemed that this was the only way to get close to his arrogant younger brother. However, as the older brother, he always seemed to be looked down upon by his younger brother. Now, he didn't want to be looked down upon. He wanted Yu to know that even though he wasn't as smart as him, he had the ability to protect him and his mommy. Yu, Daddy, Mommy, and I live together, in the same house, together, what do you think? He still remembered how he stood in front of him and confessed his feelings. I like it very much. I like Mommy and I like you. I want to live together as a family. Like this. That's the feeling of home, isn't it? I definitely won't snatch your mommy from you. On the contrary, you'll still have Daddy's love and my love. Between the three of us, we'll spoil you, okay? Yu snapped out of his thoughts and smiled, but his eyes were tearing up. He was a clear-minded person. How could he not know that Xiao Yichen was pretending to be stupid? As the older brother, he was deliberately giving in to him. No matter how much he bullied him, Xiao Yichen would just laugh it off. Look! Xiao Yichen raised his wrist and waved it in front of Yu. Do you still remember this necklace? Under the moonlight, the amethyst necklace on Mu Yichen's wrist shone brightly. Of course I remember. Yu raised his wrist and put it together with Yu's. The identical amethyst necklace on both wrists was beautiful and in sync. Chapter 33-26. I swear I'll protect you forever. Little Yichen's fingers interlocked with his brother's tightly. The twins had a tacit understanding of each other, so there was no need for words. They could understand each other's hearts. Not far away, the sound of a ship's engine could be heard. However, the cruise ship did not approach the port. Instead, it sent a yacht over. Yu held onto him with one hand and carried the suitcase with the other until the yacht sailed towards them. There were 2 men on the yacht. When they approached the port, they were shocked to see 2 identical children standing together. Why were there 2 children? Wasn't there only one? Moreover, where was the 3 billion in cash that they agreed on? Don't tell him that the money was in the suitcase that the child was carrying. How much money could such a small suitcase contain? The 2 children looked too similar. In the past, Yu was much shorter than Xiao Yichen. However, in the past year, Yu had grown rapidly and was gradually catching up to Xiao Yichen's height. The 2 of them were almost the same height, so it was even harder to tell them apart. Why are there 2? The man muttered in English. Yu said calmly, isn't it better to have 2 people as hostages? This isn't a losing deal. The man immediately picked up the radio and made a call. It was obviously to Dietrich. No one knew what he said. After hanging up, he came ashore and snorted coldly. No matter how many people there are, we have to follow the rules. Yu handed the suitcase to him calmly. How much is here? Yu said calmly, $500 million. The man took the suitcase and was about to open it when he realized that there was a combination lock. This combination lock was different from other common combination locks. This combination lock consisted of 5 digits and an iris recognition system. It was difficult to crack a 5-digit combination lock. Moreover, it was set up by Yu. Combination lock? The man ordered in broken Chinese, "What's the combination? Who do you think you are? You can't tell me the password until I see your leader in person." Yu wasn't stupid. He knew that if he wasn't prepared to pay that much money, Daoist wouldn't let him board the cruise ship. Then, he wouldn't be able to see his mother, let alone negotiate with Daoist. Therefore, he specially prepared $500 million. That phone call just now was the man following Dimitri's instructions on how to deal with it. However, from the looks of it, his guess was right. If he took the briefcase away, there was no need for him and Mui Chen to keep their lives. Yu saw a gun on his waist. That gun must be used to end his life. Daoist must have told his subordinate to kill him as soon as he got the cash. Therefore, he had specially set up a strict password lock. Of course, he would not hand over the password lock so easily. Otherwise, once he got the money, they would be shot on the spot and their bodies would be thrown into the sea. Yu had made a careful plan beforehand. He even knew Daoist's trump card. This man was so cunning that he had to be on guard. Otherwise, he wouldn't have brought Mui Chen into danger. The man was indeed annoyed. He immediately pulled out his gun and pressed it against Yu's forehead. He said fiercely, "Are you playing with me?" Chapter 33:27. You've misunderstood. How dare I joke around with my life? Be smart and hand over the password. If I tell you the password, I'll be shot between my eyebrows by this gun in your hand and drown in the sea. His words were truly shocking. The man widened his eyes and immediately reacted. He pressed the muzzle of the gun even tighter. Do you believe that I'll kill you right now? The cold pistol was emitting cold air from the pitch-black hole. Mui Chen was so nervous that he broke out in a cold sweat. He was even prepared to grab the gun at any moment. Yu was calm enough. Instead, he smiled and said, "If you kill me, your boss's $3 billion will be gone." Oh, right, I forgot to mention that other than me, no one else can open this password-protected box. Let me board the ship. Yu opened his arms and said calmly, "I have a deal that I want to discuss with your boss." The man looked at him suspiciously. Then, he put the gun away and began to search Yu and Xiao Yichen's bodies. When he was sure that they were not carrying any equipment or weapons, he snorted coldly. "Give me your hands." Mui Chen did not understand what he meant. Yu raised his hands and allowed the man to handcuff his wrists. The latter immediately understood and obediently extended his hands, allowing his wrists to be handcuffed. The two little munchkins boarded the yacht successfully. As soon as Mui Chen and Yu boarded the yacht, they were led to the VIP cabin. The yacht was huge. It was a few hundred meters from the entrance to the VIP cabin where Daoist was. When a door opened, Mui Chen and Yu walked in. Daoist was sitting on the leather sofa. When he saw the two little munchkins, he asked in confusion, "Why are there two of you? Why are there two kids?" Yu raised her head and met Dimitri's eyes expressionlessly. "Dimitri, we finally meet. The other one is?" "You don't need to know who it is." Yu looked up and said to Dietrich, "Now, can you remove the handcuffs on our hands?" Daoist looked at him warily. Yu tilted her head innocently and said contemptuously, "Don't tell me you're afraid of two weak children." What a joke. Immediately, someone unlocked the handcuffs on Yu and Xiao Yichen. Yu naturally sat down opposite him. She smiled and said, "Mr. Daoist, due to Hurricane Group's negligence, we're deeply sorry for the losses we've caused you. So, we're here to express our gratitude." Yu signaled with her eyes. Xiao Yichen immediately understood and walked forward. She placed a suitcase on the table and unlocked it in front of everyone. She slowly pushed the suitcase full of US dollars in front of Daoist. Daoist glanced at them indifferently and couldn't help but frown. The US dollars were stacked neatly in the suitcase. $500 million was not a small sum, but compared to the amount Daoist had requested, it was nowhere near enough. Moreover, compared to the amount he had lost, it was not even worth mentioning. Chapter 33:28. Daoist was an ambitious capitalist. He was cunning and greedy by nature. How could he be satisfied with such a small amount? He leaned back leisurely on the sofa, swirling the wine glass in his hand. He glanced expressionlessly at Yu, who was sitting elegantly in front of him, and snorted. "This is your so-called sincerity?" Yu smiled and said calmly, "That's right, Mr. Daoist. After all, I've caused you quite a bit of loss, so this is a token of my sincerity." "A token of my sincerity? A token of my sincerity? Heh, what did this brat think he was? A philanthropist? Token of my sincerity? Heh." Daoist couldn't help but laugh out loud. He took a sip of red wine and slowly stood up. He walked up to him, leaned forward slightly, and looked down at him. He asked coldly, "A mere 500 million USD. How does it compare to the amount I've lost?" Daoist's eyes were calm. He smiled and said, "Of course it's insignificant. But Mr. Daoist, don't you think it's too much to ask me to prepare so much money in 2 hours?" Daoist narrowed his eyes, revealing a beast-like sharpness. He curled his lips coldly and laughed mockingly. He waved his hand and smashed the wine glass in his hand at Yu's head. Bang! The entire wine cup was smashed to pieces. The scarlet red wine dripped down the tip of his hair. "Is this your so-called sincerity?" he roared in disdain. Yu. Mu Yichen turned pale with fright as he pounced over in trepidation. Yu was still sitting calmly on the sofa. He didn't make a sound. His lips were still curled into a gentle smile, but his face was a little haggard. The crimson red wine mixed with viscous blood flowed down from his forehead, soaking half of his jade-like face. A strand of chestnut hair on his forehead was stained with blood and flowed into his eye socket. His entire left eye immediately turned crimson red. With one eye closed and the other half open, he calmly looked at Daoist without the slightest hint of panic. When Mu Yichen saw this, anger rose from his heart. He suddenly stood up and glared at Daoist. He wanted nothing more than to throw a punch at this face. As he watched this man humiliate Yu, he was naturally furious. Yu narrowed his left eye and raised his hand to stop him. He said calmly, "Brother, don't be impulsive." Xiao Yichen was indignant. He gritted his teeth and turned around. "But... Yu, you're bleeding." "Eyes. Are eyes important? Did the glass get into your eyes?" "It's okay. Sit down." Mu Yichen gritted his teeth and finally stepped back unwillingly. Yu calmly rolled up his sleeves and casually wiped the blood and wine off his face. He smiled at Fei Lian. "Daoist, I'm very sorry about this. I also know that your loss is not something that can be compensated with a mere 500 million. But don't you think that what you did, kidnapping a weak woman to threaten her, is really ungentlemanly?" Even though he was in such a sorry state, he still maintained perfect etiquette. The smile on his face was elegant and charming, and there was no trace of disappointment. Even Daoist couldn't help but be stunned. Chapter 33:29. However, it only lasted for a moment before he regained his composure and a look of disdain appeared on his face. Daoist turned around and returned to the sofa. He sat down slowly and snorted at him. "Manners? Humph, you're just a little thing. Do you know how to behave?" Yu smiled and said, "I'm still young and inexperienced. Compared to you, I haven't seen much of the world. Naturally, I'm not good enough. If I've offended you in any way, please forgive me and don't hold it against me. We have a long future ahead of us. Don't let such a small matter ruin our friendship." Friendship? This little guy was smart. He knew that he couldn't make enemies with him and wanted to befriend him. "Since you said you wanted to make a deal with me, what's the deal about?" Yu said, $3 billion and let my mommy go. Ha! Since you said it's a deal, where's the $3 billion? I've already said that it's too much to prepare within 2 hours. That's too much. Daoist said coldly. Since you said it's a deal, we'll give you the money and you deliver the goods. That's the rule. I don't care what methods you use. If you don't get it, then you're breaking the contract. The man's sinister gaze fell on him as he said this. He couldn't help but feel suspicious. You didn't even prepare the money. Who gave you the courage to come? He was digging his own grave. Even if I didn't prepare anything, should show my sincerity. Yu smiled. Moreover, my mommy's life is still unknown. I should at least confirm with my own eyes that she's safe and sound. Only then can I fulfill my promise to you. Xiao Yichen immediately stood up and said, "Let us see mommy." Daoist glanced at Mu Yichen and furrowed his brows. Mu Yichen was obviously extremely worried. He lost control and said, "I want to see my mommy. Let me see her." Daoist raised his brows and tapped his fingers on the sofa's armrest. He laughed and said, "What a filial child. It's rare for someone to be so protective of their mother." He gently waved his hand, and one of his men immediately stepped forward. With a bang, he threw a punch. Xiao Yichen was caught off guard and was hit squarely by the punch. His body fell to the ground, and the huge force caused his head to shake. He shook his head, but in the end, he couldn't withstand it and fainted. Since he wants to see his dear mother, let him see her. Yu stood up nervously. "What are you doing?" The subordinate beside him immediately raised his leg and swept him to the ground. Yu frowned in pain, but did not make a sound. He gritted his teeth and raised his head. Daoist said coldly, "Go and lock this little thing up with that woman." Understood. The subordinate walked over and grabbed Xiao Yichen's collar with one hand, easily lifting him up and dragging him out. The door closed again, leaving only Yu and Daoist. Yu looked worriedly in the direction of the door. His face was full of fear, but there was a victorious smile in his eyes. He struggled to get up from the ground and said, "Give me 5 hours. I'll fulfill my promise." Chapter 33:30. Daoist narrowed his eyes dangerously. "You want to talk terms with me?" Yu smirked. "I'm in a weaker position now. What right do I have to talk terms with you? You can take this as a request." He struggled to get up and walked to the table. He pushed the suitcase over and said slowly, "The money here is a token of my sincerity. Please give me 5 hours. After 5 hours, I'll prepare 3 billion and present it to you." Daoist suddenly stood up and grabbed him by the collar. He pulled him in front of him and said darkly, "After 5 hours? Brat, you can't be playing some kind of trick with me, right? How would I dare to play tricks with you?" Yu's collar was grabbed by him and his throat was locked by his collar. He was a little out of breath and his face was slightly red from suffocation. However, he still said calmly, "My mother and brother are in your hands. With these 2 bargaining chips in my hands, how would I dare?" Daoist stared deeply into his eyes. Suddenly, his lips parted, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. "Ha ha ha. All right." Daoist let go of his collar. "I'll give you 5 hours. Don't disappoint me. If there's even 1 cent less, don't blame me for throwing the 3 of you into the sea to feed the fish." Yu heard this and finally heaved a sigh of relief. He looked at Daoist and his back was covered in cold sweat. He smiled and said, "Thank you." There was a huge cellar under the cruise ship. It had always been used as a warehouse. A few crew members dragged Mu Yichen by the collar and dragged him to the cellar. They opened the lock. "Damn it! It smells like mold." In the cellar, there was a huge iron cage. This kind of iron cage was usually used to transport beasts or rare animals. In Dietrice's case, it was used to smuggle people. Unspoken was trapped in the cage. Although the cage had been wiped clean, the smell of blood could still be smelled. Needless to say, this cage had taken someone's life before. However, she did not feel afraid. Or rather, she had a certain conviction in her heart. Heaven helps the worthy. At least, she knew in her heart that she would not die for the time being. Even though she couldn't figure out the intentions of the man who locked her up here, she vaguely realized that he ordered people to dress her up in such beautiful clothes to show off to others. Auction? She had heard the word pop from his lips. Unspoken would never have thought that Dietrice was planning to auction her alive. As for this cage, it was because a living person was disobedient and was beaten to death. How could she have known that in this world, there existed such a dark network and such a terrifying auction? Put this brat in a cage. Mu Yichen opened his eyes slightly. Along the way, Mu Yichen had been silently familiarizing himself with the terrain. Even though his eyes were closed, he was still able to draw a complete map in his mind. Realizing that he was already in the cellar, his right hand slowly touched his waist belt. Previously, before boarding the ship, Dietrice's subordinates had searched his entire body but didn't find any suspicious weapons. That was because his weapons were hidden in an unknown place. Chapter 33-31. He wore a belt on his pants. The belt was just an ordinary belt, but the buckle was not simple. When Unspoken saw someone enter with a child in his hand, she had a bad premonition. Until she saw the child in the man's hand, she screamed in shock. Before she could finish her sentence, Xiao Yichen opened his eyes slightly and gave her a look. Unspoken immediately shut her mouth and clutched the iron bars tightly as her heart trembled with fear. The crew member threw him to the ground and tried to kick him a few times. Seeing that he didn't react, they assumed that he was a child and wouldn't be a threat. Hence, they walked to the other cage and opened the lock. Now was the time. Mu Yichen flipped over and landed firmly on the ground. He casually grabbed the buckle, pulled it off, and pressed the mechanism. A sharp blade immediately popped out from the metal buckle. He looked around and saw that there were 6 people in total. When the crew heard the commotion behind them, they turned around abruptly, only to see Mu Yichen standing behind them with a sharp dagger in his hand. Their faces turned pale with fright. Damn it, where did this brat get the dagger? Take him down. 2 tall and burly men immediately pounced on him. They originally thought that the child would be scared witless, but they didn't expect Xiao Yichen to charge at them. The 2 men immediately took out their machetes and slashed at him. Xiao Yichen nimbly dodged their attacks and grabbed the man in front. He gripped the man's wrist tightly with such force that the man cried out in pain. The machete fell to the ground with a clang. Ah! Xiao Yichen sneered and jumped up. His hands held the man's waist tightly, and he used the man's strength to twist his legs around the man's neck like a pair of scissors. He twisted his neck fiercely and spun it in a dazzling manner. The man's neck was tightly gripped. Then, he felt a sharp pain as the inertia threw him to the ground. His back slammed heavily against the ground, as if his spine was about to break. Xiao Yichen raised his hand and slit his throat with the sharp dagger. Blood spurted out. From the moment he made his move to the moment he killed his opponent, it took him less than 10 seconds. Fast, accurate, and ruthless, every move made one's scalp tingle. No one would have thought that a little brat would have such powerful skills. Such a small fellow was actually such a ruthless character. Go! The man gave another order and fumbled for his gun. One of the men picked up a scimitar from the ground and charged at him. Be careful. When Unspoken saw another man stabbing him with a knife, he was so scared that he almost suffocated. Xiao Yichen curled his lips and didn't turn around. Based on the sound of footsteps behind him, he turned around and performed a beautiful and clean roundhouse kick. It accurately hit the man's face, and the man fell to the ground with a thud. His nose was broken. The man fell to the ground. He covered his nose and wailed in pain. Xiao Yichen reached out, grabbed him by the collar, and viciously punched his throat. The man's throat made a strange sound. His eyes widened, his face stiffened, and he stopped breathing. Xiao Yichen looked up and heard the sound of a gun being loaded. From the corner of his eye, he saw a cold glint flash across his face. Chapter 33-32. The moonlight shone in through the skylight. The remaining crew members held their guns tightly and aimed them at him. They shouted in broken Chinese, "Don't move. They have guns?" Xiao Yichen's lips stiffened. He slowly stood up and raised his hands above his head with a cold expression. "Put the knife down." The man shouted at the top of his lungs again. It was as if the person standing in front of them wasn't an 8-year-old child, but a demon. Mu Yichen tilted his head. The corners of his lips curled into a devilish smile, as if he didn't understand. The man gestured with his hands and said, "Put the knife down." Little Yichen replied with an "oh" and pretended to put down the dagger in his hand. Only then did they relax a little. However, this slight relaxation caused him to narrow his eyes abruptly. The dagger in his hand flew out and drew a dazzling arc in the air. With a swoosh, it ruthlessly pierced one of the men's neck. Blood splattered on the ground. He wanted to shoot, but his body had already collapsed. The remaining 2 men panicked. They were so frightened that they were about to lose their minds. In their panic, they fired blindly and lost their aim. Little Yichen stretched out his leg and hooked the corpse on the ground with the tip of his toe. He pulled it up and used it as a shield in front of him. His right leg hooked onto the machete that had fallen not far away. He hooked it up, caught it firmly with his hand, and threw it back. Compared to the 2 good-for-nothings, Little Yichen had undergone rigorous training. Coupled with his calmness in the face of danger, he did not panic at all even when he was outnumbered. He aimed accurately at one of the men's chest and viciously plunged his dagger into it. The remaining man raised his gun with trembling hands. However, he realized that he had already fired all 6 bullets in the panic. He hurriedly wanted to reload, but Xiao Yichen was already walking towards him. He was quick to change the magazine, load the gun, and fire. Mu Yichen suddenly grabbed his wrist and pointed his gun to the side. Bang! 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 All 3 bullets hit the other man. Mu Yichen lifted his leg and kicked the man's crotch. The man cried out. His legs tightened and clamped down. Xiao Yichen jumped up and grabbed the man's hair. He dragged the man by his hair and walked towards the metal cage. Clang! A loud sound was heard. The man was in so much pain that he felt dizzy. "Spare me! Spare me!" Mu Yichen did not have the patience to listen to his nonsense, though. Grabbing the man's jaw with one hand and his neck with the other, he twisted his neck viciously. The man's throat joint was immediately dislocated. With a whimper, the man's head drooped weakly as he fell to the ground. The scene was a mess. And the pungent smell of gunpowder filled the entire cellar. Mu Yichen slowly stood up and surveyed the corpses on the ground. He carefully checked them again until he was sure that they were all dead. Finally, he heaved a sigh of relief and calmed himself down before walking over to his mother. Unspoken was so shocked that she couldn't speak. Xiao Yichen immediately comforted her. "Mommy, don't be afraid. You'll be fine." He lowered his head and looked at the lock of the metal cage to study it. Unspoken still had a lingering fear. She couldn't help but tremble with fear when she thought about how the 6 of them were against him. Mu Yichen locked the cellar door from the inside to ensure that no one would barge in. He then focused on studying the lock in his hand. "Yichen. You. Why are you here?" Chapter 33-33. You. Why are you here? Unspoken was still in shock. Xiao Yichen stuck out his tongue playfully and said, "Of course I'm here to save Mommy." "Mommy, don't be afraid. I'll get you out right away." So effective, she looked at him with emotion. She was scared witless by the earlier scene. Even though she had witnessed Mu Yichen's formidable fighting skills, she would crumble if he were to suffer even the slightest bit of injury. There was a lock on the iron cage. Mu Yichen studied it for a long time and decided to try picking the lock. Even though such a lock could be opened with a gun, if he was not careful, he could accidentally hurt his mommy. After pondering for a long time, he suddenly opened the watch and broke off the needle inside. Using the thin needle, he bent it slightly with his fingers and inserted it into the lock. He held it and turned it. It was different from the locks he used to train with in the army. There was still some difficulty in picking this lock. After all, locks were different in different eras. With the change in technology, many of the lock-picking techniques from the past were no longer suitable for today's technology. Mu Yichen studied it for a long time. He lowered his head and pressed his ear against the lock to listen carefully to the mechanical structure inside. Generally speaking, the internal structure of a lock was very complicated. The better the lock, the more detailed the internal structure. The key shaft, the lock core, the lock tongue, the groove, the push plate, the blade, there were more than 10 parts. If one was not very familiar with locks, they would not be able to understand the main points. However, no matter what kind of lock it was, it could definitely be picked. This was because there was no technology in the world that could make a perfect lock. The perfect tool to pick a lock would be a paperclip. However, he did not carry such a tool with him. The length of the needle on the watch was limited and so was its stiffness. Hence, he had to be careful and hold his breath to listen to the movements inside and make a judgment based on the sound. Xianxia also kept quiet and looked at him nervously. Mu Yichen suddenly stood up. He ruffled his hair in frustration and furrowed his brows. "Is it because you can't open it?" Mu Yichen shook his head. He was afraid that she would be nervous and worried, so he quickly comforted her, "It's just that I don't have the right tools. I'm still missing something." "What do you lack?" Mu Yichen turned around and looked at the corpses lying in a pool of blood. He wanted to give it a try, so he searched them one by one. However, other than pistols and magazines, he didn't find anything useful. Until he found a box of chewing gum on the last person's body. He opened it and sniffed it. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, he popped one into his mouth and chewed until it was as soft as mud. Then, he returned to the cage, spat out the gum, and slowly stuffed it into the lock. Xianxia was dumbfounded. She didn't know what kind of technique he was using, but she didn't dare to make a sound for fear of disturbing his train of thought. It was Mu Yichen who came up with the idea of chewing gum. When he found the chewing gum, he immediately thought that the chewing gum could be used to pick locks. Just now, he had carefully studied the structure of the lock. It was a one-word lock, so he could use the chewing gum to give it a try. However, he wasn't confident. He had only seen others try this method of picking locks, but he had never tried it himself. Chapter 33-34. After Mu Yichen inserted the chewing gum into the lock, he pressed it with his finger until it was firmly embedded. Then, he straightened the needle and inserted it in. He kept turning it, and in less than 3 seconds, there was a click and the lock popped open. Xianxia was stunned the whole time. Mu Yichen opened the lock and opened the cage door. He saw that Xianxia's wrists were still in handcuffs. Mu Yichen was very familiar with handcuffs, so it didn't take him much effort to unlock it. However, the moment the lock was unlocked, there was a beeping sound coming from Xianxia's body. Beep, beep, it sounded like the sound of some electronic device being activated. It sounded almost at the same time when the lock was unlocked. It was as if unlocking the lock had activated some kind of device. But this was just his guess. Mu Yichen couldn't help but feel that it was strange. Because this sound wasn't unfamiliar to him. When he was in the army, during actual combat training, he had seen the scene of bomb defusing. This was the sound of a time bomb. Oh no, could it be? Yunshishir was about to get up, but Mu Yichen pressed her back down and said in a deep voice, "Mommy, don't move." "What's wrong?" She couldn't help but feel nervous. Seeing Mu Yichen's vigilant face, her breathing quickened. Mu Yichen immediately smiled and comforted her, "Mommy, don't be nervous. From now on, you'll be in my care, okay?" "Okay." Mu Yichen held his breath and listened attentively. Following the source of the sound, he suddenly lifted Yunshishir's belt. When the belt was undone, there was a time bomb placed on her waist. The reason why Yunshishir didn't know about the existence of this thing was that this time bomb was installed when she was unconscious. A linkage device. Mu Yichen looked at the time bomb's fuse that was connected to the handcuffs. When the handcuffs were unlocked, the bomb would automatically activate and start the countdown. This was an extremely complicated linkage device. The time kept counting down. On the small rectangular screen, the numbers kept jumping. The countdown of 300 seconds was just a short 5 minutes. Yunshishir naturally didn't know what a linkage device was, but when she saw the rows of explosive tubes on her waist, she immediately realized what this thing was. Her face turned pale. Bomb? Yeah. She was frightened out of her wits at once. She had seen time bombs in movies a few times. Although the design was different, the difference was that the ones in the movies were all fake. In real life, once a bomb exploded, it would not have eyes at all. If an ordinary person saw this thing, it would undoubtedly be like seeing the Grim Reaper. They would definitely be scared witless. She immediately pushed him away and said, "Hurry up and leave, don't bother about me." He wise Huns ******, "Mommy, I'm mommy's mommy, I'm mommy, mommy, I'm mommy. Don't chase me away. Once the bomb explodes, you'll die." "Mommy, listen." Mu Yichen took a deep breath and said, "I've learned some knowledge about defusing bombs." Although he was comforting her, the reality was that there was no such thing as a bomb disposal expert in the army. Most of the time, they used robots to defuse the bombs. Chapter 33-35. After all, compared to robots, human lives were more important. It was better not to use humans. The loss of a robot was small, but if a human died, it would be hard to explain. The structure of a bomb was indeed simple, but sometimes, the simpler it was, the more difficult it was to solve it. Such a thing could take a human life, so it was even more difficult to test one's luck. Mu Yichen said in a low voice, "Mommy, this is a time bomb. In other words, its device is designed to be able to explode. Some bombs were made in time by pulling the fuse and detonating it immediately. The design of a time bomb could prevent it from exploding. This meant that there was a chance of survival. Even if it was very slim, there was still a chance. There were only 4 minutes left. Mu Yichen swallowed hard and slowly removed the shell of the time bomb. His hands were very fast, but it still took him 20 seconds. After removing it, what was exposed to the air was the intricate wiring inside the bomb. There were many types of time bombs. According to his understanding, there were 3 types of bombs, ********, electric detonation, and black gunpowder. ********, bombs generally only needed to be removed directly. Without *******, the bomb was useless. Even a pistol could not break it. No matter what, it would not explode. Black gunpowder was a child's play. Other than that, ******* was used by the military and was more common. For someone like Daoist, it was impossible for him to get his hands on such a thing. ******* bombs were very fierce and had an extremely bad temper. The slightest vibration would cause it to explode. In other words, as long as one stood up, the bomb would explode. The other bombs were octogenium, ******, Tian, and C4. These were all extremely high-end bombs. They were rarely seen on the market. Even many terrorists could not get their hands on such things. Under normal circumstances, they would only appear in extreme situations. Moreover, the structure was extremely complicated. If one encountered these, it would be very difficult to remove them. However, after some research, Mu Yichen found out that this bomb was an electric detonator. Usually, such bombs needed to be wired. Of course, it was not like those commonly seen on TV where one could choose between a red and a blue wire. Instead, it needed to be cut off to activate the battery and power circuit. Most of the detonation current was direct current. In this way, once the power source was destroyed, the bomb would lose its function. Without electricity, it wouldn't explode. However, it sounded very simple, but the wiring of such a device was very complicated. It was very difficult to distinguish between the power cord, the detonator cord, and the detonator cord. Mu Yichen counted and found that there were about 10 wires. These wires were densely packed and orderly, but they were all of the same color. If he made a mistake, he would really be finished. Even if it was cut correctly, there was a certain probability of triggering a capacitive reverse detonation, which was impossible to guard against. The situation suddenly became a little tricky. Mu Yichen fiddled with the threads, cold sweat seeping out of his forehead and trickling down his cheeks. Unspoken looked at his nervous face and realized that this bomb seemed to be very tricky. If it was not handled properly, it would be fatal. Chapter 33-36. Mu Yichen curled his lips calmly. He lowered his head and looked at the wires. He said calmly, "There are still 3 minutes before the explosion. Even if I can't save you, I can still stay with you for 3 minutes." He suddenly looked up. His eyes were red, but he said slowly, "Mommy, I promised Daddy that I would bring you home safe and sound. I can't go back on my word." He couldn't go back on his word. Daddy was still waiting for them to come home. He couldn't leave Mommy behind. Unspoken suddenly choked up. "But, you can't force yourself, okay? If there's really no hope, you must run. There's no need to stay and risk your life." Xiao Yichen suddenly smiled. He looked up at her and asked gently, "Mommy must be worried that you'll implicate me, right?" Unspoken's lips trembled. "Sometimes, I have to say that Mommy is really weak. You're just like a tree branch that can be broken by the wind. Take this time, for example. Mommy, you're really stupid. Do you really believe anyone's words so easily? No matter how close you are to them, they will betray you one day. But Mommy seems to be really innocent. You believe anyone's words so easily." After a pause, Xiao Yichen changed the topic. "So God must have sent Daddy to your side because he couldn't stand it anymore. He gave birth to me and you, 2 powerful guardians. I think that protecting Mommy must be you's and my life's mission. No matter what, we can give up everything, but Mommy can't leave us alone." Unspoken was stunned. She was extremely touched. Xiao Yichen smiled with tears in his eyes. "You're very kind. Even though some people in this world don't like this kind of kindness, because humans are born selfish. This kind of selfishness is the root of human nature. But being selfish isn't wrong because you only have one life. Everyone wants to live well and protect themselves. But being kind isn't wrong." Unspoken bit her lip hard, but Xiao Yichen continued, "Mommy, did you know? Before I met you, I felt that the world was cold. When she was in the Mu family, she had to be careful at every step. Everyone was scheming in the dark for their own benefit. But ever since I met you, every day with you, I feel like the sun is shining brightly. Because Mommy was really gentle. It makes me feel warm." As he spoke, he took a deep breath and wiped away his tears. "So, I can't lose you. This is my bottom line." As he spoke, he lowered his head again and focused on identifying the direction of the line. Unspoken smiled and planted a kiss on his forehead. Her heart calmed down and she no longer felt so fearful. The direction of each line was extremely complicated. It wasn't because the lines were intricate, but because Xiao Yichen had to use a lot of brain power just to mark the lines clearly. After marking the lines clearly, he had to check the direction of the lines and study the function of each line. Before they knew it, 3 minutes had passed. Xiao Yichen had already eliminated 5 lines. 3 of them were lead lines and the other 2 were timer lines. Chapter 33-37. However, in reality, such wires were only used to stop the timer and detonate in time. Once they were cut, the countdown would stop and they would detonate 5 seconds later. It was easy to confuse such wires with power cables. However, Mu Yichen had some experience. The more important the wires were, the shorter and longer they were, the more dangerous they were. 120, 119, 118, the seconds continued to count down. Mu Yichen's face was already covered in cold sweat. Sweat flowed into his eyes and blurred his vision. Unspoken immediately wiped it away for him. The more he studied it, the more he hated that cunning Daoist to the core. Damn it! How on earth did they design such a complicated circuit? Mu Yichen ignored the cold sweat all over his body and tried to remain calm. He continued to arrange the wires. After all the wires were classified, the alarm went off. There was only a 20-second countdown left. He sucked in a breath of cold air and casually pulled out a dagger from his waist. Flicking it open, he listed out 2 of the wires. The blade of the dagger pressed against the 2 wires. A cold light reflected on his face, dazzling his eyes. Mu Yichen's throat was blocked, and his hands involuntarily trembled. "Mommy," Mu Yichen suddenly raised his head and held her hands tightly. He planted a kiss on the back of her hands and revealed a bright smile. "No matter what, we'll be together forever. I won't leave you." Unspoken was choked with sobs. She could only nod her head randomly as tears flowed from the corners of her eyes. Although she believed in her son's ability, fate was unpredictable. Other than fear and uneasiness, she felt more heartache. How could this little guy bear so much for her? Unspoken hugged him and said word by word, "I believe in you, Yichen. Don't worry. Do as you wish." "Okay." Mu Yichen pinched the 2 wires. Only one of them was a power cable. He wasn't sure if the other was a condom lead or some other wire. However, he couldn't find any other condom lead. These 2 lines were the only 2 life-saving lines that he could use to save his life. However, he didn't dare to cut off the power cord that had already been confirmed. If he cut it off, the device would have a capacitive reverse detonation. Then, cutting off the power cord would also trigger the bomb. In that case, he could only pin his hopes on another path. Although he was not that confident, it was worth the risk. Mu Yichen gritted his teeth and pinched one of the threads. He closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths. In the last few seconds, he cut off the thread. The timer on the time bomb let out a prolonged sound. It was so sharp that it was somewhat ear-piercing. The number stopped at 003 seconds and didn't move anymore. Mu Yichen was so shocked that his eyes widened. Only when he confirmed that the timer had stopped did he realize that he had cut off the fuse. However, he did not relax immediately. Just in case, he immediately cut off the power cord, and the timer immediately went off. Unspoken was so nervous that she held her breath. Even when she saw the timer go off, the sweat on her face continued to roll down. Mu Yichen finally slumped to the ground. The series of stressful events just now, especially at the critical moment, had almost exhausted all his mental strength. Now that he had relaxed, he was exhausted and weak all over. Chapter 33-38. He felt exhausted, as though he had just finished a huge battle. His mind was blank. Seeing him like this, Unspoken roughly understood the situation and knew that they were out of danger. However, she still did not dare to move, for fear that the slightest carelessness would lead to another crisis. Mu Yichen slowly sat up, wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, and smiled with lingering fear. He suddenly pounced on Yunshushu and snuggled into her arms. He hugged her so tightly that it was as though he had found a lost treasure. Yunshushu also hugged him tightly. She had held back her tears during the nervous process earlier, but now, she suddenly felt like crying. Yichen, thank you. At the most critical moment, he did not give up. Mu Yichen cried and laughed at the same time. Even though he had amazing courage, he was still scared out of his wits just now. The reason why his hands were trembling so much was because he was really prepared to detonate the bomb. He did not expect that the heavens would favor him. This was his luck. Mu Yichen could not be bothered to be affectionate with her. He immediately removed the bomb from her waist and threw it out of the skylight. Yunshushu stood up and asked in confusion, "Where are we going now?" Mu Yichen said, "Mommy, from now on, follow me. Do whatever I ask you to do." "Okay." "But," Yunshushu said hesitantly, "this is a cruise ship. It's no different from a prison on the sea. How are you going to take me out of here?" Mu Yichen smiled. "So, I'm going to the cockpit right away." After a pause, he asked again, "Mommy, are you scared?" "No. With you around, I'm not afraid of anything." Yunshushu shook her head firmly. Mu Yichen smiled. "That's good. Follow me." Yunshushu immediately lifted the hem of her dress and followed him. However, just as she stepped out of the cage, she was tripped. She looked back and realized that her long dress was caught by a metal wire. What a nuisance. Yunshushu gritted her teeth. She couldn't care less about her image. She tore off a large part of her skirt, revealing a pair of long, smooth legs. Mu Yichen held her hand and opened the door, but he didn't rush out. He knelt on the deck and pressed his ear to the deck, using the sound transmission method to determine the people nearby. Through the deck, he made a preliminary judgment that there were people in the vicinity. He immediately pulled Yunshushu to the right. On the way here, he had already drawn a rough map in his mind. Therefore, he had a rough idea of the direction to the cockpit. Cruise ships were more or less the same. Most of the cockpits were on the second or third floor, while they were on the first basement floor. Mu Yichen first settled Yunshushu in a corner, then he went forward to open up a path. Just now, he took away the guns and ammunition from the few pitiful crew members and silenced them. He loaded the pistol and carried it on his back at the entrance of the corridor. Then, he heard someone coming downstairs. From the sound of the footsteps, he could roughly tell that there were two people. He held his breath and focused. Suddenly, he thought of something and immediately put the gun back into the gun case at his waist. When the person came closer, he suddenly dodged. His movements were agile and fast, like a ghost. Chapter 33-39. The other man had just taken out his gun, but before he could load it, Mu Yichen grabbed his wrist and viciously struck his elbow joint with his other hand. In an instant, the man's arm was bent at a strange angle. Ah! Just as he was about to scream, Mu Yichen clasped his jaw and twisted it hard, dislocating his jaw. That person looked at him in horror, as if he was looking at a scary monster. Mu Yichen did not give him any chance to struggle. He grabbed his throat tightly and squeezed it hard, causing his throat joint to crack. He dragged the two corpses to one side and hid them in a corner. After cleaning up the scene, he returned to Yunshushu's side. "Mommy, let's go." The reason why he did not intend to use a gun was because using a gun would cause the scene to be covered in blood. Mommy would be scared if she saw it, but this was secondary. The main reason was that if he dirted the scene, it would be too eye-catching and it would be easy to be discovered. Compared to the tall and strong crew members, he was too skinny and small. But this was a disadvantage, but it was also an advantage. Although if they really fought, no matter how strong he was, it would be difficult for him to fight against a large number of people. But it was because he was so skinny that he was able to be as agile as a wolf. He carefully carried on his back. Along the way, after dealing with a few crew members, he brought Xianxia to the cockpit. In the cockpit, the co-pilot was sitting on the chair. At this moment, a nimble figure flashed past the door and opened the door of the cockpit, quietly sneaking behind him. Before the captain could react to who it was, he was punched in the head. Mu Yichen picked up the man's tottering body and twirled the dagger in his hand nimbly. The pitiful man only felt a chill in his throat as hot blood spurted onto the passenger seat. The stench of blood assailed his nostrils. He spared the captain's life. The little fellow quickly used the same method to escape into the engine room, leaving a crooked corpse behind as he returned to the cockpit. The captain was scared half to death. He curled up in a corner, trembling. Mu Yichen took out his gun and aimed it at his temple. He coldly said in broken English, "Do you want to live? I'm begging you. Don't kill me." The captain begged humbly. Mu Yichen pressed the gun a little harder. "If you're obedient, I won't kill you." "Yes. Yes. I promise I'll be obedient." Mu Yichen took out a pair of handcuffs and cuffed his left hand to a fixed position. He ordered, "Deactivate the alarm." Most cruise ships had radar warning devices. Once other ships or units approached, the warning device would be activated. The only reason he spared the captain's life was because he didn't like killing people. The captain looked weak and powerless and didn't seem to be a threat to him. More importantly, he didn't know how to operate a cruise ship. If the cruise ship lost its helmsman and lost control, the consequences would be unimaginable. To be safe, he did this. The captain nodded in a daze. He couldn't help but hesitate. Mu Yichen stabbed the dagger in his hand into his thigh. "Ah!" The captain gritted his teeth and cried out in pain. Mu Yichen grabbed him by the collar and warned him coldly, "Do as I say." "Yes. Yes." The captain was in so much pain that he couldn't breathe properly. He immediately pulled down a lever. There was a ding 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 sound and the screen showed the UnparalleledSwordWill. The alarm had been deactivated. Chapter 3340. Continue sailing as usual. Yes. Understood. Mu Yichen pulled Xianxia into the cockpit and locked the door. "Mommy, this is the safest place for now." Xianxia nodded in a daze. Mu Yichen had already cleaned up the corpses in the cockpit. She suddenly felt uneasy when she saw the little guy covered in blood. She didn't want to see Mu Yichen kill anyone, but she knew that if Mu Yichen didn't get rid of all these people, they would be the ones getting rid of. Wasn't it always the law of the jungle in this world? Mu Yichen didn't know what she was thinking about. He took out the necklace around his neck and opened it gently. He pressed a hidden button and the location information was immediately sent to Mu Yaja's handheld terminal. At the port, the sea breeze blew against their faces. Gong Jie's armed ship was already ready to set off. 2 hours ago, he had rushed over. He happened to pass by the nearby waters, so he was still in time. Other than the armed ship, he also brought along more than 10 armed helicopters and 2 nuclear submarines. Of course, he had also prepared $3 billion. Alas, while Gong Jia was prepared to get the $3 billion, Dietrich would have to be alive to get it. Mu Yaja's handheld terminal vibrated. He opened the interface and saw that Mu Yichen had sent a location signal. He was excited and looked up at Gong Jia. "We can set off now." Gong Jia had been waiting for a long time. When he heard this, his handsome face showed a trace of surprise. "You've received the signal?" "Yes." Before the 2 little guys set off, Yu and Mu Yichen both wore a necklace. This necklace was a signal receiver and could also send location information. It was also at this time that Mu Yichen realized that Yu had invented such a terrifying technology. A dagger disguised as a belt, a signal transmitter hidden in the necklace, and a smart nanochip implanted under the skin. These were concepts that he had only seen in science fiction magazines, but Yu had already put them to use. Let's go. Mu Yaja sent the location information to the cargo ship's navigation system and followed the route to the destination. Compared to Daoist's cruise ship, Gong Jie's armed ship could be said to be an extremely crazy existence. Its speed was top-notch and it was fully armed. When Mu Yaja first boarded the ship, he was shocked. The so-called ship was only from Gong Jie's mouth. A certain man always liked to use understated words to describe things that were too heaven-defying. Although it was called ship, in fact, it was actually a second-generation aircraft carrier developed by the former Soviet Union. An aircraft carrier. Even Mu Yaja was surprised. One had to know that even though the military was very advanced, not every country had an aircraft carrier. Even a superpower like the United States of America only had 10 Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carriers in service. The other two were super nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, and 12 aircraft carriers were patrolling the sea. They were the world's undisputed super maritime overlords. Many countries did not have an aircraft carrier in service. All of them dreamed of having an aircraft carrier that they had developed on their own. Having an aircraft carrier meant having a strong military force. Chapter 3341. Having an aircraft carrier meant that the military forces were powerful. However, such an aircraft carrier that was not inferior to a super nuclear-powered one was just a toy ship to Gong Jie. This was also the reason why Hurricane Group was so fearful. If Hurricane were to use all of its strength, then its armed forces would be comparable to any of the 5 joint Union member nations. Although it was about a few hundred kilometers away from the target, it was not worth mentioning to Gong Jie. If he sped up, he would be able to reach the target in about an hour. After all, his aircraft carrier was a super nuclear-powered one. Compared to nuclear-powered, the power of Dietrich's broken ship was nothing. After Mu Yichen sent the location, he stood up and glanced at the captain. Then, he said to Yun Shishir, "Mommy, can you do me a favor?" Now, I'm going to look for Yu. You stay here and keep an eye on him. Don't let him do anything." Yun Shishir was shocked when she heard this. Yu is also on this ship?" "Yes." Xiao Yichen nodded. "I came with him. But I'm worried that he's in danger, so I'm going to save him now." Yun Shishir nodded quickly. "Yes, go quickly." Mu Yichen immediately passed the dagger and pistol to her and reminded her, "You must protect yourself. If he dares to play any tricks, let him have a taste of his own medicine." "Okay. Mommy should know how to use a gun, right?" Yun Shishir nodded. "Yes, I learned it on the set." "Okay, Mommy, I believe in you." After Mu Yichen finished speaking, he left immediately. There was a long distance between the cockpit and the VIP cabin. It was equivalent to going from the bow to the stern of the ship. When he left, he deliberately locked the door of the cockpit. The windows of the cockpit were made of bulletproof glass. This way, they could prevent outsiders from entering. After all, he didn't feel at ease leaving his mommy alone there. But compared to mommy, he was more worried about Yu. After all, Dietrich was a cunning old fox. His methods were sinister and ruthless. He didn't know what methods he would use to deal with Yu. Sneaking all the way to the first floor, Mu Yichen walked out of the corridor and was caught off guard when he bumped into 3 patrolling sailors. Mu Yichen was shocked and immediately ran back. The 3 sailors saw it, but before they could see it clearly, they felt a shadow flash before their eyes. They looked at each other, vigilantly pulled out their pistols, loaded them, and walked to the entrance of the corridor with their backs against the wall. They turned around and looked, but there was no one. "Where is he?" Just as the 3 of them were confused, Mu Yichen appeared above their heads. His hands gripped the door frame of the cabin roof, and his legs kicked out cleanly. His straightened feet hit the faces of the 2 people at the front. The two fell to the ground. The other one nervously raised his wrist and was about to shoot, but Mui Chen didn't give him a chance to aim. His legs clamped the man's neck, and with a flip, he threw him to the ground. He snatched the gun from the man's hand and shot at close range with a bang. The man who was about to sneak up on him from behind had a headshot. The power of a bullet was not to be underestimated. Especially when shooting at close range, as long as one aimed at the head, there was a 100% chance of a headshot. Chapter 33-42. Fresh blood splattered all over his body. He immediately jumped up and loaded his gun. Bang! Bang! He fired at the other two men. One of them, who had been shot in the chest, was still struggling. Mu Yichen walked over, raised his leg, and stepped on his neck. His right hand gripped the man's jaw and twisted his throat. He threw the three men into the sea and quickly cleaned up the floor. When he passed by the banquet hall, he noticed that it was brightly lit. He looked in through the window and saw many well-dressed people gathered. What's going on? Mu Yichen looked out of the window suspiciously. The guests were gathered in the hall, but the strange thing was that everyone was wearing half a mask that covered their eyes. It was extremely strange at first glance. Everyone surrounded the stage and was in high spirits. In the hall, the music was melodious and the guests were chatting and laughing. It looked like a simple banquet. However, Mu Yichen still found something strange. An MC was standing on the stage. Behind him, a red curtain slowly rose. Next, we will be showing the third piece of art. It's called Pearl of the Sea. The starting price is 500,000 USD. As the red curtain rose, a rectangular iron cage slowly appeared. The red curtain rose very slowly. The music suddenly stopped. Therefore, the strange sound from behind the red curtain could be heard more clearly. It was the sound of a person struggling. It was the sound of metal hitting metal. Mu Yichen widened his eyes in shock. It was not because of the seemingly strange auction, but because of the woman whose hands and feet were tied up in the cage. The woman's 4 limbs were tied up. Her face was also covered with a mask. Her mouth was also tightly covered with black tape. She had obviously regained consciousness and realized that she was tightly tied up. She was afraid and uneasy, so she struggled fiercely. Although her face could not be seen clearly and her voice could not be heard, the mask only covered her eyes. It was not difficult to see the woman's delicate appearance through her delicate nose and lips. She had golden hair and fair skin. It was obvious that she was of European descent. I don't know if everyone has seen it, but this piece of art is quite exquisite. The starting price is 500,000 USD. The highest bidder wins. When the woman heard the host's voice, she began to tremble nervously. Everyone held their breaths in shock. Whispers could be heard from time to time in the crowd. This is a stunner. 500,000, the starting price is not high. I want it. Someone immediately raised the number plate. 1 million US dollars. The host said, "All right, Mr. Number 10, 1 million USD once." Immediately, another lady raised her paddle. 2 million. The host's face was flushed red. Number 24 lady, 2 million USD once. 5 million. Everyone below the stage sucked in a breath of cold air. The sudden change was too great, and everyone became nervous. Mu Yichen didn't know the identities of the people gathered here, but they were probably rich and respectable. The host shouted, "Number 50, 5 million going once. 5 million going twice. Are there no more bids?" The host shook his head. "What a pity. She's a rare beauty." He walked to the cage and unlocked it. Then, he slowly took off the mask on the woman's face.